Jæja. Hvað segið þið? Hvernig gengur í kaffinu þarna frammi? How's it going? I guess most of you who are already in have the coffee. Some might still be waiting to grasp one. I am Hlín Helga. I'm the curator of DesignTalks. I also go under the name of Fly 3 today, which is the mic, which I kind of like. So Fly 3, I would like to welcome you all to DesignTalks 2022. Woohoo! Yes, we're finally back on track, right? Just with this kind of detail that we all kind of woke up to the fact that the track is set in a different world. But today we really wanted to focus on what we could do about that. What can we do about that? How can we move forward? How can we be brave about moving forward, about rethinking, reinventing, taking a deep moment, tapping into our resilient powers, a healing, to heal what we have, what has happened in the world, in our societies, and how can we then deal with it, deal with the crisis, deal with the new and changed circumstances, the advances in technology, extended realities. How are we going to move forward with all of this, and what is our role in it all? And then, lastly, how can we then also create and grasp that dream that we have? How can we grasp the dream or create the dream? How can we speculate? How can we propose alternatives to move forward, to create the future that we all want? This is what today is going to be about. And we are extremely lucky, extremely happy to be here again. We have people coming here to speak and give us insights into the work from almost all over the world. It's amazing. And with diverse projects and backgrounds. And we are also extremely lucky to be able to be open to a wider audience this year. Because very last minute, we were able to, we got the chance to be live streamed through Dezeen, which is happening right now. So that's, maybe we should give the world an applause. And this was made possible by the collaboration with Business Iceland, which we're extremely grateful for. Speaking of Dezeen, also extremely happy and grateful to be welcoming on stage our moderator of the day, who is Marcus Fairs, editor-in-chief, hi, and founder of Dezeen. Give him an applause. A funny fact, you were here in the heydays of DesignMarch, like 2008, 2009 probably again.
It was one of the first ones. It was just after I started Dezeen, and just after you started DesignMarch. Yeah, and it was a bit smaller than this. I remember there being, what, about 40 people in the room when I did my talk?
Yeah, and I was saying it was Marcus Fairs and Bjarke Ingels, you know, and, and the rest of us. So it's great that you're here with us again. You'll be moderating a couple of conversations. But really, to drive the day forward, we have Guðrún Sóley, Gestsdóttir, who's a TV presenter, is quite well known to the Icelandic crowd, and she's gonna be the host of today. And thank you so much for doing that. And take it away.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Hlín and Marcus, and thank you all for being here today. There's a magnificent schedule ahead of us, lots to look forward to. And while I don't want to excessively raise your expectations, I will say that the ideas who will be presented here today will just a tiny bit change your lives, and ever so slightly revolutionize the way we think, and just nudge our worldview into a brand new perspective. And I can say that. I heard fractions of them yesterday. You're in for a treat. All joking aside, I'm honored to be a part of today. The participating speakers, organizers, and guests are among the most prominent creative minds in the arena of design. And just in this room, a collective of inspiration and original thought strong enough to move mountains, or at least a very heavy, sturdy piece of design furniture. Maybe a sofa, I don't know. Because it's been a great couple of years, and unimaginative non-designers like myself need people like you to start a new era with a splash of imagination, creativity, and color. And I have no doubt that you'll do just that. But enough chit-chat, let's get started. First, I'm going to present the themes of our first session. We have some keywords that you might want to keep in mind, which will be reoccurring through the speaks. The first one is resilience. Next up is circular thinking, regeneration, allow this to inspire you, and reconnection with traditional crafts. And this is the schedule until lunch. As you see, it's tight, it's packed with inspiration and acknowledgement from all these people. And further information can be found online. And I'm also going to encourage you to go to this webpage, sli.do. It's not an app, it's a web page where you can send questions for the speakers, because every speaker will be given the opportunity to answer questions from the room, and they can be sent anonymously. So make use of that splendid opportunity to ask away. It's very simple, just find your browser, type in sli.do. The code is DT2022, and it couldn't be simpler. I'll be reminding you of this all throughout the day. And I think that's all for the practical information. I really want to get the show started, everything I promised. And I'm going to introduce the first speaker today. It's Michael Pawlyn. He's been described as an expert in regenerative design and biomimicry. And I'm going to allow myself to declare that those descriptions are true. He's established his firm, Exploration Architecture, to focus on high-performance buildings and solutions for the circular economy. He has been involved in many highly acclaimed projects, including the Eden Project, the Sahara Forest Project, and was one of the initiators of Architects Declare. Last year, he published the book Flourish, which he co-authored with Sara Ichioka, suggesting new design paradigms for our planetary emergency. I want to welcome Michael Pawlyn and give him a good, nice welcome and silence as well. Enjoy.
Great. Thank you so much for that introduction, and thank you for involving me today. So I'm going to share my slides now. So this is what I'm keen to talk about, a regenerative paradigm. And a lot of what I'm going to be talking about comes from the book that was just mentioned, which I co-authored with Sara Ichioka. So equal credit to Sara for these ideas. And before I get into the kind of main content of my talk, I'd like to kind of set a context based on deep time. So as some of you may know, the first photograph of planet Earth from the moon, the Earthrise photo, was sometimes credited with starting the environmental movement. But in many ways, I find this photo more intriguing. So this was taken by the Cassini spacecraft. As it was passing Jupiter, it turned its camera around and it took this photograph of planet Earth. And it shows us there just isolated in all this space. And it's clear from this that no one's coming to our rescue. Our fate is entirely up to us. And this makes me think about ideas of deep time and where we are in the universe. And I'd like to encourage you to think of the history of planet Earth as represented by a single calendar year. And imagine that you're standing a breath before midnight on New Year's Eve, and you're looking back over that history. And what you'd find is that nothing much happened for the first 3 months, but the first life forms eventually appeared in March. The dinosaurs didn't appear until early December, and they disappeared around Christmas Day. The first humans appeared at lunchtime today on the 31st of December. The whole of recorded history has flashed past in the last 30 seconds. In the last 2 seconds, humans became a geophysical force affecting our climate. In the last third of a second, that's the time I've been alive, we have extinguished more than 2/3 of the non-human biomass on Earth. So we're a young species still trying to get things right. And what we do in the next 1/10 of a second will determine to a large extent the future of humanity. And it's a really curious moment in history because we have all the solutions we need to make rapid progress on addressing the climate and biodiversity emergency. But at the moment, that progress is way too slow. And what I'm going to argue is that that's partly because we're still stuck in an old paradigm of conventional sustainability. And we urgently need to move on to a new paradigm. And a lot of the inspiration for the book I wrote with Sarah, it came from this essay, actually. It's called Leverage Points, and it's by Donella Meadows. Now, she was a systems thinker, and she argued that because systems are complex, it's not always obvious where to intervene to bring about the changes you need. And the best way to bring about change is at the level of the paradigm or mindset that drives that system. And what I mean by a paradigm is a broadly shared idea across society that affects to a large extent the way we behave. And this diagram from the architect Bill Reed, I think, describes quite effectively the shortcomings of sustainability. So this shows different levels of environmentally responsible design. The most basic level is conventional practice, which you could call one step better than breaking the law. Above that is the realm of green design, of relative improvement. And then above that is fully sustainable, or as Bill McDonough calls it, 100% less bad. And the problem with this is that most of what we've been doing over the last 30 years has been somewhere in that sort of green zone, which means that it's really just part of a degenerative cycle. And it's clear now that that's just not going to be enough. We need to find a way of getting above that line of neutrality. And just as there were very lively debates 25 years ago about what the ultimate in sustainability would be, I think now there needs to be a really lively debate about what the ultimate in regenerative design should be. And I'm personally convinced that it's going to involve us getting to the point where humans have overcome our dualistic separation from nature, and that we are participating as nature and co-evolving as part of that system. And to try and clarify what this means for designers, I'm going to talk about 4 main headings. So regenerative landscapes, regenerative cities, regenerative buildings, and regenerative materials. So starting with the regenerative landscapes, so this is the North Africa, obviously, and this was a project that I jointly initiated shortly after I set up Exploration. It's called the Sahara Forest Project, and what we were trying to do here was to bring a number of technologies together in symbiotic or synergistic ways. And the core technologies were forms of solar energy, a greenhouse that is cooled and humidified with seawater, and forms of desert revegetation. And it turns out that these technologies are actually much more effective and efficient when you bring them together than they are separately. And we built a version of this which allowed us to really explore all these synergies. So this was built in Qatar, and it was opened during the climate change talks that occurred in Qatar. And you can see the main elements of the project. That's the seawater cooled greenhouse in the middle. We had various forms of solar energy. We were experimenting with desert revegetation, with algae for biofuels, and so on. And it worked extremely well. We managed to grow cucumbers throughout the summer with half the amount of fresh water of conventional approaches. And alongside tuning all the technological systems, we wanted to explore what effects this was having on the landscape. We had a fairly strong feeling that this was going to be delivering a regenerative benefit. And so we've just made a note of all the mammals, birds, and insects that appeared on site as we were running the project. And this infographic shows what we achieved. So the first things to appear were flies, nothing particularly interesting there. But then literally the same day that we brought the first plants to site, we had the first birds appearing, and soon after that, the first insects, so grasshoppers, crickets, and then a month later, we had the first butterflies. And bear in mind that this was about 5 kilometers from the nearest significant patch of planting. As the plants got more established, we had other birds appearing, we had more insects appearing. And then we had a bit of a problem for a while with rats. Their numbers were expanding rather rapidly, but still we were getting more birds and insects, which was nice. Then we had mice to deal with, but still more birds and insects, so that was all good. And then 3 days after the algae ponds were filled, we had the first dragonflies. And I don't know where they came from because we were a long way from the nearest dragonfly habitat. But what this shows is that if you can create the right conditions for nature to recover, it does have quite an amazing capacity to regenerate. And then we had an appearance from a feral cat, which is quite handy, and the number of rats and mice started going down. We had an appearance from a rare bird. It's called a hoopoe, not often seen in Qatar. Then we had other types of birds. That's got a rufous-tailed shrike. We were getting more insects, more wagtails. And eventually we had the first indigenous mammal. It's called a jerboa. And all of that was achieved in just 8 months on a site 100 meters by 100 meters. And I'm absolutely convinced that if we were to do that on a bigger scale, over a longer time scale, that regenerative effect would be even more pronounced. Moving on now to regenerative cities, one of the most persuasive models I've heard for how to design a regenerative city comes from the consultants called Biomimicry 3.8 in the US. And what they argue is that design rating systems like LEED and BREEAM, they don't go anywhere near far enough. And what you should do when you're designing a new major building or new piece of city is you should start by analyzing how a pristine ecosystem in that part of the world would function. How much oxygen would it produce? How much water would it filter? How much carbon would it sequester? How much food would it produce? How much wildlife would it accommodate? And those should become the targets for your new piece of city. We're a long way from that at the moment, but there are enough examples of projects that do bits of that for me to be convinced that that is absolutely possible. And so I think we're going to see more examples of buildings that incorporate vegetation. We need to find a way of doing it without adding too much to the embodied energy of buildings. I think we'll also see a really profound difference in the spaces between buildings. And this is a fantastic example in Seoul, South Korea. So this river used to be covered with a 10-lane motorway. And the mayor of Seoul persuaded people to tear this motorway down and restore the river, and it's become a really fantastic amenity that's even improved the microclimate in this part of the city. Another really important shift that we're going to see, I believe, is that we're going to see cities as equivalent to ecosystems. So you can see that this looks like a food web, and this is actually an extension to Stockholm. And the idea here is that you treat each element of a city, each land use, each function, as equivalent to a species. And you try and connect those all up so that the waste from one part of that system becomes the input for something else. And it moves towards being a zero waste, highly productive system that runs entirely on solar energy. And we explored some of these ideas on the Sahara Forest project. So this shows what we were doing. And in simple terms, the green icons are the different synergistic technologies. And essentially what we were doing is using what we have a lot of, sunlight, seawater, and carbon dioxide, to produce more of what we need. And then we deliberately connected up all the different technologies. And I don't have time to talk about all those interconnections, but you can see that this was moving towards the equivalent of an ecosystem, a densely interconnected system. And some people might look at that and think, well, that looks hellishly complicated. How on earth can you design for that kind of complexity? Well, I think it's actually getting a lot easier to design for that kind of complexity. And one of my colleagues developed a design tool that makes it easier to do that. So this allows you to enter different technologies with their resource flows and to connect those up. And it shows you anything that is underutilized, and that's an opportunity to add something to the system that creates more value. And then you can press play and you can see how it functions, and you can test this for resilience. You could cut one of those links, and if the whole system breaks down, then that would be an indication that you need to add further duplication and redundancy to the system to make it more robust. But overall, embracing this kind of complexity will allow us to get towards zero waste regenerative systems that run entirely on solar energy. And on regenerative buildings, we developed an office building some time ago. We worked with a biologist as part of our design team. And it was really studying examples from biology that helped us make a whole series of breakthroughs. So this is a 3D printed model that we made of a section through a bird skull. And there are a lot of examples in biology of phenomenally efficient structures that achieve their amazing resource efficiency by putting the material exactly where it needs to be. So in a bird skull, for instance, you have these incredibly thin layers of bone connected together with struts and ties. So it's like a combination of dome technology and space frame technology. And 3D printing and 3D manufacturing are going to be real breakthroughs for this, because it will allow us to approach the efficient complexity of biological structures without any cost penalty. In actual fact, it should eventually work out cheaper because we'll be using far less material. And we studied nearly 100 different biological organisms in the design of this office. So it was examples of shells and curved leaf forms that helped us design a new glazing system that would achieve about a 50% saving in glass and a 75% saving in aluminium. We studied examples like folding beetle wings to help us design the sun shading system that would convert all surplus energy into solar energy and let in exactly the right amount of light. And this is how the building looked after we'd completed the feasibility study. So all of that was really driven by daylight and resource efficiency. And as far as possible, we were trying to make this building entirely naturally lit. And that's how the atrium would look. And one of the engineers involved has predicted that if this gets built, it should be one of the lowest energy office buildings in the world. I think the added benefits, though, will be its regenerative effect on the occupants in terms of improving their well-being and productivity. So turning to regenerative materials now, there's a lot that we can learn from the way that biology has stewarded resources. So this example, this is called a coccolithophore. It's a microorganism that lives in the sea. And these were part of Earth's carbon management system. So when there were increases in levels of CO2 in the atmosphere, you would have had massive blooms of these in the ocean. And these grow these beautiful skeletons out of calcium carbonate, and they transferred carbon from the atmosphere into the rock and reestablished a balance. And so one of the lessons that we should learn from this is that we should be looking at ways to make more material from atmospheric carbon. And of course, timber is one example, but there are lots of others. And increasingly, we're going to see products like this. This is biomason. So this is a way of making building blocks just using sand and a calcifying bacterium with no added cement, no additional energy. And I think we're going to see increasing use of plant-derived materials. So this is a high-performance insulation product developed by a company called Biome, just made with plant fiber and mycelium, and is actually much safer and much healthier than conventional insulation products. This was a table that my office designed for an exhibition, and it was 3D printed out of a biologically derived polymer. So that's using carbon from the atmosphere and then designing it in a way that learned from the growth patterns of bones and trees to try and get as close as possible to a theoretically perfect structural solution. So this is putting the material exactly where it needs to be to achieve the most efficient possible structure. Now, some of you might be wondering, how do we make this change happen? How do we bring about this paradigm shift from sustainable to regenerative. And that was part of the thinking behind Architects Declare a Climate and Biodiversity Emergency, which we launched in 2019. And we were delighted to see how it was picked up in other parts of the world. Iceland was one of the first countries to join in with this. And the intention here was to try and use the collective influence of a large number of companies to help bring about the kind of high-level systems change that are very difficult to achieve at the scale of an individual project or company. And I think there are really three things that we need to bring about a tipping point so that the solutions that already exist and we've had for a long time are kind of unleashed, and that design creativity can really be allowed to make progress. And currently it's being held back by old thinking, by conventional economics, and by political resistance. So we now have over 7,000 companies signed up in 28 countries to a declaration of action. And I think there are three essential things that we need for this tipping point. We need to show that we've got the solutions clearly articulated. We need to show we've got the skills to deliver them. And importantly, we need to show that we've got sufficient public support. And so I don't think this is going to happen without massive public protests, not necessarily just Extinction Rebellion, but the Fridays for Future. And to some extent, I think we've all got to become activists. I never imagined that I would spend as much time as I do now on forms of activism. But that is what I think we need to do to bring about this important and very urgent shift towards regenerative design. And to conclude, I just want to say a few things about this amazing biological organism. So this is a glass sponge. And these live in deep ocean water, and they've evolved these stunningly beautiful skeletons. And structural engineers have been studying these for quite some time now, looking at how they achieve such amazing efficiency. And the vertical fibers are actually hollow glass fibers with apparently superior optical quality to human-made glass fibers. And each of those fibers goes down into the seabed and terminates in a cluster of lenses. That's the image you can see on the right there. And those lenses focus light from bioluminescent bacteria, and they conduct that light up the structure to put on a kind of lighting display to draw food towards it. And that glass, that high performance glass, is manufactured at ambient temperature and pressure with local materials of silica and calcium carbonate with perhaps 1/1,000,000th of the amount of energy that we use when we make glass. So this could show us how we could make beautiful, efficient structures. It could show us how we could achieve ultra low energy manufacturing. And it also inspires us to think about creating symbiotic relationships in our built environment. And overall, I think it also points to a new and revised relationship with nature. And rather than seeing nature as something to be plundered for resources, it shows us that nature can be an absolute source of wonder and a source of some of the best solutions that we need. So you could look at the biological adaptations that exist as like an amazing design source book that have all benefited from 3.8 billion years of research and development. 3.8 billion years of brilliant solutions illuminated by previously unparalleled scientific knowledge, facilitated by previously unimaginable digital design tools. We have never had such an opportunity to rethink and design solutions for a regenerative future. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Michael. Amazing, amazing and inspiring speech. It's such a shame you can't be here on the stage with me, but that was a deliberate decision not to come, wasn't it? Can you talk us through the reasons why you're not here in person?
Well, I don't want to guilt trip you, Marcus, but yes,
Go on.
I have been consciously reducing the amount that I fly, and that's partly because of carbon footprint, but also because I want to be able to, I guess, share this message with as many people as possible. And I can perhaps get more talks done by not spending a lot of time traveling.
Oh, so it's not just for environmental reasons, it's also efficiency reasons. So you can reach more people by staying home.
Yeah. Yes, but I mean, I still do go to events, live events. I went to one recently in Denmark. I took the train all the way there, and managed to meet up with lots of friends on the way. So I still go to live events sometimes.
And what can people do? What do you do? What can people do to reduce their environmental footprint? Not flying is an obvious one. What else should we encourage people to be doing? I mean, it's protesting. You mentioned protesting, but what else? Yeah.
So, I mean, in a way, I think we need to move on, perhaps, from thinking about how we just reduce our footprint. And as designers, we need to look at where we can have the maximum influence. And what I think we need to do is see how we can actually maximize our agency. And I do think that architects and designers have an amazing capacity to lead on the shift that we need to bring about. And I think it's much more significant, it's likely to be much more significant in terms of impact if we can help make this shift happen from a sustainable mindset, which has just been about mitigating negatives, into a much more positive mindset of regenerative design, which is optimizing positives and moving into a more systemic way of thinking, which is going to make it easier for us to do what we need to do. The urgent task for humanity now is to integrate everything we do into the web of life that supports us. And that's a significant step on from conventional sustainability. And that, I think, is where we can achieve our greatest impact, by leading on that change.
That's an interesting distinction that you make between sustainability and regeneration. Can you define what regenerative design is? What exactly is it, and how is it different from sustainability?
Yeah, sure. So I think there are three key distinctions. So one is that sustainability was often about mitigating negatives, and we need to get into a positive realm of optimizing positives. Another was that sustainability tended to be rather mechanistic, and we need to move into a more systemic perspective that acknowledges the complexity of the system that we need to integrate ourselves into. And the third one is shifting from a very human-centric perspective, so it's just about humans, to a broader perspective that embraces the whole web of life. So those are the three key things. And in the book that I wrote with Sarah, we've argued that there are 5 fundamental shifts in thinking that we need to bring about. And the first of those we call possibilism, which is about maximizing our agency. The second is about rethinking our relationship with the living world. The third is about rethinking our relationship with time. The fourth is about rethinking who we are as humans. And then the fifth one is about rethinking growth and defining a new purpose for our economy.
Now, it's quite a complex set of solutions you're proposing. This audience is extremely intelligent. I would like to think that Dezeen's audience is extremely intelligent. But how do you get this message across to ordinary people, ordinary businesses, ordinary house builders who might be thinking, yeah, but that's too expensive, or I don't like the look of that, I want to stick with what I know. How do we spread this message to everyone so that we can start to generate change?
Yeah, sure. Well, that's a really important question, and it's something that I think about a lot. And I think we should always try to speak in terms and language that are understood by your audience. So, if I was speaking to a different audience, I might use much simpler language and simpler descriptions. And I think that key distinction between sustainable and regenerative is a fairly easy one to grasp. And what I'm referring to is about sustainability is about being less bad. Regenerative is about actually being positive. And what I think can be very influential is getting people to conclude things for themselves. And if you can just explain that key distinction and then ask people what their purpose would be in life, particularly if there's someone quite influential who runs a company or whatever, and ask them, would you really want your purpose to be degenerative or regenerative? I think there are very few people who would consciously want to spend their life being degenerative.
That's a really good point to end on. My clock stopped, and now it's suddenly telling me there's no time left. I was going to ask you one more question, but maybe we'll leave this for you to ponder. What do you think about people like Elon Musk who think humanity's future is on Mars and we should be aiming to colonize Mars? Let's leave that one hanging. We can discuss during the coffee break, since there's no time now. Thank you very much, Michael.
Thanks very much for involving me. Nice to talk to you, Marcus.
My mind conjures up a phantasmal world
As promised, inspirational and fun. I want to thank Michael and Marcus for a very interesting conversation, and we're going to keep the good times rolling. I'm just going to raise your attention to a couple of available seats in the front rows. So if any of you in the back rows would like to take advantage of that and move forward near to the stage, that's very welcome. But I'm going to introduce the next speaker, which is Gabriela Sánchez de la Barquera. She's the creative director of Vlisco, a 175-year-old fabric manufacturer. She left Mexico for the Netherlands in search of a different perspective on design. In 2019, Gabriela initiated a design project to support women who were brutalized and used as weapons of war in the east of Congo. Her career has led her, via print design for Vlisco, to the foundation of a startup in West and Central Africa, building a network of young creative talents in film, fashion, photography, music, and illustration. And before I welcome her on stage, I'm going to remind you of Slido, which is the web app that you could use to send questions, which I'll ask Gabriela after her talk. Remember, it's sli.do into your browser, and the password is DT22. Give a warm welcome to Gabriela Sánchez y Sánchez de la Barquera.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you for the invitation. I'm really happy to be back in Iceland. I'm Vlisco's creative director. I run many projects, but in this occasion, I have decided to share with you the history of the brand. And the second part of my presentation will be a small project that I initiated 5 years ago. So we start with history. Vlisco is a Dutch textile brand. We're 176 years old this year, and it was founded by the family van Vlissingen in the Netherlands. The family learned and copied the printing techniques from the Dutch colonies in Indonesia at that time, and they developed a way to industrialize batik by still preserving the core elements of the technique. During that period, the geographical situation of Ghana made the area an important harbor. The Indonesian fabrics, therefore, were quickly acquired and adopted by African people, partly because of the closure of the Indonesian trade market, but partly also because of the trade that was going on in that region already. At Vlisco, we have an immense archive of prints. We keep this type of books that show the first tests and trade conversations from that period. We also have books of swatches from that period from other companies that Vlisco bought. Until today, we can see conversations and trade of designs that we print till today in Africa. And so the textile trade in Africa began 120 years ago, and Vlisco started collaborating with African women that were trading our fabric in the region. This is one of our 120 traders in Kinshasa. Another one, a trader in Accra, Ghana, Kinshasa, two Bukavu traders, that's in the east of Congo, right in the border with Rwanda, Goma. And this is a daughter who had recently lost her mother when I visited her, and all neighbor traders were coaching her on how to run her freshly inherited business. And I think that is the beauty of the trade tradition at Vlisco. It is often a family business, that it is passed generation after generation. This is a whole family of traders in Kumasi, Ghana. And Vlisco's trade tradition has built a long, organic, and strong chain of trader women that network around that region. Their whole family has lived, and till today lives, from the trading tradition as far as 4 generations in time. This is a trader and her daughter in Cotonou, in Benin, a trader and her daughter in East Congo, and the same in Goma. Some families made fortunes in the past, and that's where the Mama Benz term comes from. For those who do not know what a Mama Benz is, a Mama Benz in Benin, in Togo, used to be a woman who was probably one of the first citizens in their country able to own a Mercedes-Benz car. So I think maybe Flisco is today one of the most women-centric business that exists. These women know our product well and the meaning of our brand in terms of tradition and past. Through fabric, they have transmitted the business, but not only that, also the knowledge and culture that is linked to storytelling with fabric and icons. This is a trader and her daughter in Accra. Until today, although they are very tough women, our traders start talking about love and jealousy and success only when the fabric touches the table. They speak about tradition, about values, and that's where the storytelling and narrative of our iconic fabric comes from, as well as the fact that we should not forget traders are also salespeople, so they might use storytelling also as a marketing tool. The design you see is baptized as the well, which means in traditional culture, you have to think deep before you talk. The design on the left has been interpreted as a bunch of bananas that represents unity, strength. And the one on the right is the well that we just saw before, and I use it just to show you how our DNA of the product has changed through time. The design on the left is a single tree exposed to the storm will break, but a cluster of trees will withstand the storm. The yellow one in the middle has been baptized as being a life failure is like being struck by a sword. And the one on the right symbolizes being a good woman. So it's often used in the dowry box before marrying. On the left is a trader in Tamale, Ghana, and the design right next to her means it's better to have a snake close to you than an enemy. The pink one means high-quality beads do not make noise when they fall. And the one on the right, I just used to show you that some designs of our archive just marked a certain period of time in history, like the opening of a new airport in Africa or the election of the first president in a decolonized country. This, of course, happens less and less. And I like to talk about different types of women that are also linked to Flisco. These are other women outside the business that cannot talk about the story of their life and the history of fashion in their country without mentioning our brand. Flisco was unique at the time it started, and it quickly acquired the luxury position of what Dior or Gucci mean to us in Europe. These women also love Flisco because Flisco has been part of special moments of their life. And those stories, they sometimes transmit to their daughters. But unfortunately, Flisco is often associated with the past and tradition, so modern women will have difficulties adapting to our product today. Wax print is still used at the church. And because Flisco had and still has a high price point, it was and is often still used in very special occasions, such as funerals, or naming ceremonies, or the ceremonies around the dowry before people marry. And in very traditional contexts, Flisco is, of course, also still a symbol of success. I once met a young boy in Congo, and he told me, the moment I can offer my mom a Flisco fabric, she will know that I made it in life. Some countries like Benin wear Flisco all the time. Even if we are massively copied by China, we're still the designers of the industry. And because we sell a half-finished product, I think we're a very good example of self-expression. Also because of the magic of our coloring techniques. The same design in different colorways and use of color and different consumer will look completely different. These are examples of what color does in different prints. So using the same print and applying the color differently. And also because we are a half-finished product, tailors play a very important role in Flisco's environment. I think it's definitely an interesting story for a brand to tell within the global polluting world of fashion. And then where do the prints come from? At Flisco, we'd like to think that we create works of art in our prints. The design department is composed by 17 designers, and each of them has his own handwriting and methodology of work. And we cherish that and respect that. So I think that's the magic of our print assortment. In the world of flowers, and just flowers, we champion different handwritings. But Flisco is more than flowers. Flisco is more than what we understand by commercial print design in the world. We have giant vegetables, animals, geometrics, organics, textures, storytelling within geometry, city landscapes, a sea of butterflies, motorcycles, UFOs. And there is a factory, of course, which is strongly connected with our heritage and our product's DNA. Today, we cherish and we're proud of our heritage, but we also acknowledge at Flisco that very often the factory is as well the biggest challenge for Flisco to innovate and move forward. This is the printing process. We use copper rollers and wax. On the right, you see our cloth with the wax applied. On the right, the wax already after the indigo bath. And there are our felt rollers that we use for coloring at the end, and then a classic design coming out of the factory. This is some of our marketing. We print 400 prints per year, divided into 7 million yards. We trade directly in West and Central Africa, but also international markets such as Belgium, UK, France, and US, and this is to connect with the diaspora. And we work on TV channels for different Pan-African channels. So I also do the creative direction of monthly campaigns for social media and 95 billboards across West and Central Africa. And at the moment, we're at the quest of transforming an old manufacturing and trade company into a younger and luxurious brand. We're targeting a younger consumer. We have now diversified our teams at different levels in the company to become also within Africa a more diverse brand. Because Africa, I call it Africa, but Africa is not one country, and there is not only one type of skin and not one type of hair in Africa, as there is no one type of woman. So we're also at the quest of being associated with modernity, style, and fashion, rather than the corporate world that trade put us in the past. We're working on hints of brand extensions because our product comes too short in relation to how Africa has evolved. And some of our offline brand presence are our billboards. And we got some retail presence already in Togo, Benin, Ghana, Ivory Coast, and soon Congo and Nigeria. And these are some examples of how we dress our store windows in Africa, which is pretty pioneering in the continent. And this is Flisco today. Now I start my second part of my presentation. For this special occasion, I want to share with you one project I started 5 years ago at Flisco, and it's called Flisco & Co. Flisco & Co started for me with the realization of the Flisco consumer. Flisco is a brand that is associated with the older generations. far from the consumer that seeks for something else than just wax print. So I asked myself, what relevance does Flisco have for young people who cannot afford luxury and who seem not to engage with us? I thought back then that the young people of Africa matter, because by 2025, 25% of the world's young people will be in Africa, and by 2030, 50% of the world's poor people will only be in Nigeria. So I created a network across the region of young experimental talent, with Flisco offering to give their talent just a modest platform, but also mostly to listen to them. Building a network of 70 young people across 4 African countries led Flisco to travel across the region, to see places and people that the brand hadn't seen before, to visit Africa away from the capital cities, to understand the history and perception of our brand, to learn more about African history and culture, to listen to the stories of African women, of course, to see local craft, to understand the struggles of entrepreneurship in Africa, and to understand the generational differences with regards to Flisco. And here there are some teaser examples of the Flisco & Co network members. Oops, sorry.
My name na Dafe Oboro. I be filmmaker. Them born me for Ajegule, Lagos. I've practically lived all my life in this community in Ajegule.
Capturing people in their most authentic forms, as they really are, in this part of the world while fully respecting the subject is tricky. Because my aim is not to create new stories or new concepts. My intention is really to shed light on stories that already exist, stories that we often overlook or are simply unaware of.
So Flisco & Co taught Flisco many things: that young people feel the weight of the colonial past of Flisco, and that they are uncomfortable with it, that they want to build their own, and that Flisco nonetheless has a very unique position in Africa and a big awareness and prestige. That they can associate with the brand, but on their own terms and with their own interpretation. That there is a huge lack of education and a lack of material and opportunity for young creative talent. So I started creative collaborations across the continent. We put on 6 events in 3 different cities. Showcasing film, photography, fashion, art, and music. And because Flisco & Co was also created to give opportunity, we showcased and invited the network during Dutch Design Week in 2019. And some of our output, particularly film, won international acclaim. And in general, Flisco & Co started changing the perception around Flisco as a brand in young people in Africa. However, the success made the young talent restless for the next steps. So in 2019, this question began: what's next, Flisco? Young people cannot afford our product. They anyway have their own vision and future of print, but not enough room for innovation, not enough equipment, and no infrastructure to work. Of course, we were using Flisco fabric while collaborating with young creatives. So in 2019, I thought it was enough of Flisco fabrics for young people, and I organized an open call to join a week print workshop in Abidjan, where young people in Africa developed their own prints, and later we printed their designs at our factory in Abidjan. And we showcased their work during an event, and we encouraged them to express themselves through print and fashion, which is not always common in a very traditional society. So I thought, okay, young people cannot afford Flisco, many don't identify with our product. We have a good quality set of prints, designed and printed in Abidjan, and a brand DNA that seemed fresh and genuine already. So my question to Flisco was, can we build an African creative team and commercialize their work under a new brand? And can we sell their products to young Africa as well? Which is a completely different question. But if young Africa is who makes the brand, how would that be and how would that brand look like? And then COVID happened. So I was ready, but then it happened and I was asked to stop most activities. However, I created work from the distance with the first illustrated from Sierra Leone. We worked together with her to transform her work into prints. And we created specific items in Africa to only communicate on print level, not on fashion level. And we collaborated with a Cameroonian filmmaker to make a film. Oh. It's not working. Oh, sorry. So, because there was COVID, I decided to create a 3-month online print workshop that covered all the region. So it was online design education in Abidjan, Accra, Lomé, Cotonou, Lagos, and Kinshasa. We designed a toolkit to send all the equipment needed to design prints because good quality design equipment is not accessible in West and Central Africa. And together with the local offices we have in each country, we set up temporary co-working stations in all their cities. And these are some of the results of the 3 months' work with all the participants. And I'm happy to share that in 2021, Flisco & Co. became a print and fashion startup within the Flisco Group. Flisco & Co. will become a creative hub and a showroom located in Ghana and in London. We will design and print fabric made in Africa. We will design and manufacture ready-to-wear in Africa. And we plan by end of 2022 to launch the first design-driven Pan-African brand to the world. And we're not 1 or 2 Black people, we're 100 African creatives making this new brand. So stay tuned. Thank you.
Healthy reminder. And now we're on to our last lecture before coffee break. That is Company, which is Amu Song and Johan Olin, based in Helsinki, Finland. They work as artists and designers and run their own shop, Sala Kaupa, or the secret shop in Helsinki. They visit places with rich industrial heritages and work with the local craftspeople to create new products in a contemporary way while demonstrating the skills of the industrial traditions, delving deep into their former context, really like doing design detective work. Most recently, they were working with mountains and stormy seas in the outskirts of Lofoten in Norway. I simply have to know more. Amo and Johan, please hurry up here.
Hello. You can hear me? So lovely to be here. We'll just wait. Amo joins me in 1 minute. Thank you so much for having us here. So we are, or I am the other half of company. I think we were described as designers, artists, sometimes detectives. We welcome. This is a picture of our world map. We will take you to a small journey today to places in Finland to Nuutajärvi, and in Mexico to La Union, to northern Japan, and Semyon of Russia. Travel was, hopefully also will be, a really, really big part of our work. Hello.
Hello. Sorry for delay.
So we spend a lot of time waiting for trams, buses, cars, sometimes even on a horseback, to find masters of traditional crafts and learn their secrets. And sometimes, you know, the kind of the slower, the harder the journey is, the more better, the more rewarding. It's like a rite to arrive to destination. There we try to kind of get ourselves into local culture, eat the local food, learn the language, and finally then we've been always warmly welcomed by the masters that we've been looking for.
Yes. This sounds like, or this looks like we are speaking Russian fluently, we are speaking Japanese fluently, we are speaking Amish English fluently, but no, actually we don't. And as you see, our English is very broken, but somehow when we had a translator for our journey and to find all these masters we love, when we had a translator, it went wrong. When we were really correctly delivered to this master, we are designer, and then it was very distancing, but when we appeared, there's like no language and like this.
Usually they ask, like, how did you find us?
And we don't know what was the correct question, but somehow, I mean, humans without passport nationality, it worked well. Yeah, you will see. It was better without language. I'm not good at talk, but we are in design talk, so.
Too late.
Okay, I was trying to escape, but yeah, came back. Please continue.
Our approach is very hands-on, so we've been allowed to work as well, or at least pretend to work, to pretend to be helpful. We get to try these crafts, learn a little bit, and then after we think that we've learned a little bit of the techniques, then we start to suggest what we could do together with these masters. So while we are on the location, we quickly, on those days or weeks, we stay there, we come up with the plans, and make a lot of good friends. It's spend a lot of great time. And then after we've got the first things done, we then have to get on a journey. We head back home with bags filled with souvenirs. We kind of call them our idols, the original works from the masters, along with a lot of other weird souvenirs from wherever we are returning.
Yeah, I still don't know what that is, but some locals said, like, oh my God, is this your treasure? And I still don't know what is that strange things with the toothpick. But Next.
This product development back at home.
Yeah, I think when we are in love with one certain country or culture, it's like massive amount of love and culture and work, and it's not like work by the hour salary thing, but it's like you are falling in love with some man or woman or dog that is like the world is that country or world is that master, and yeah, and work is happening.
So we draw a lot. And we paint until we get a painting that we kind of have courage enough to send to the master. And could you please try making this together with us?
Yeah, because we cannot say that we want this and this and this. We want to express that with only one single painting. And we actually want to, I hate this word design, but we are in design talk, yeah. We want to make things that really describe who they are and how much we love them and how much,
We send these love letters then to the makers. Here we have a common language. This is to an Amish master that we sent. So, but it's a bit slow product development, having a couple of weeks sending letters and
again, the Amish masters, they don't read normal books and news. They read Bibles. So if we say, oh, we are designer and we have exhibition in this contemporary art museum, and that's like, there's no meaning. What? So then we draw like, okay, you are making belt and we want to this. And she said, you are good at drawing. Let's work together. So that's how the business goes.
So we are very happy that we are educated designers, so we can draw a little bit. These projects then they turn up into exhibitions where we present then the collaboration with the masters.
Yeah, we were so lucky that one of our favorite space in New York, Storefront for Art and Architecture, they said, make your exhibition in our amazing space. That's like craziest space in the world. And then we spend lots of time to think, what can we do in this amazing space? And then developed the exhibition idea, and eventually it looked like a temple. And we realized that moment, okay, oh my God, what we've been doing, what we are doing, all this making things are not actually like making things and sell it and this, but it's almost like religion for us that we.
It's kind of that we set on this long pilgrimage to meet our idols and to learn from them, and in the best cases we get to collaborate with them.
Yeah, because we cannot quit it. I mean, work you can quit and go holiday, but religion you can quit and buy. So it was. I think it's religion almost. Yeah.
Okay, then we go and meet some of the masters. We start from Mexico. Here we are in town Izúcar de Matamoros. We are meeting the Balbuena family. They are making a traditional item called Tree of Life, a Mexican clay art.
They are like candle holders, very traditional, describing Adam, Eve. Usually, it used to be used for like describing Catholic and religion, but anyway, it became local culture, and they used to give it as a wedding gift to become their centerpiece for the home. But TV replaced this, and the local don't buy for wedding gift, and it's not centerpiece. But still, there are masters making it, and it's a museum. And, tourists buy, and of course the locals buy it. But we wanted to anyway join this thing, and we somehow described our own way of thinking. Snake, why snake is like why it's like threatening. The snake has own life, and Adam Eve has own life, and all the life is having. They kind of eat each other or threaten, but it's the life. It's our own tree of lots of life.
Here's another family of candelabras, the big face and the small face, turning from Amos painting into, in the hands of La Fina Balbuena, into clay candelabras. Still in Mexico, this is maybe a detective story or maybe very poor example. We kind of tend to be fairly good at nowadays, like finding people from old books and hunting them, tracking them down. But in this case, we had no idea. So this is Ramiro. He was our designated driver that morning. We just had seen one master's works in an old book, and it just named kind of a region or a small La Union, a town, and we just let's try. We take a car and we drive there and we see if somebody knows this master. With our 10 words of Spanish, we got good friends with Ramiro, who was driving, and it turned out to be, after we gained some trust, that it is his grandfather that we are looking for. It's a small world.
He asked in his Spanish, why, no, in short English, why are you looking for him? And then use of Spanish, go.
Maestro de Alebrijes.
Yeah.
Okay, well.
And then Sisi, and then it's grandfather, and amazing.
So this is Kirino Santiago Cruz. He's a farmer turned Alebrije master, has a very unique style of making a traditional wooden figurines. With his wife Margarita, this was the first thing we made together, Nino and Nina, and turned out to be usually our masters. They are family businesses. So Kirino has a brother, Martin, and he has a son, Jaime, and with Martin we made, here is the son, Jaime. So with Martin we made another piece, half human, half animal. And with Jaime, we made a tree of alebrijes to use in the leftover branches of this process of making trees alive.
Tree become animal.
Yeah. Then we go to northern Japan. This is Master Igarashi's son. He's making traditional kokeshi art, which is a wood-turned doll, usually sold in hot spring areas in northern Japan. He was 88 years old when we met. Luckily, he has a young apprentice who will continue. And I have to tell, the first time when we met him, and we were like, it was kind of early in the day, and meeting a respectful master, and then he's sorry, he has to take a little bit of day nap, and we understand it. You are an old man, and he's like terrible hangover, and he shows on the table huge empty sake bottles, party whole night, very hangover. But afternoon we then continued working together, and he showed us how these are made.
Yeah, their specialty, kokeshi doll, is they make their dressing while the rokuro, the turning machine is on. So they just the brushes in the machine, and it makes an amazing pattern. And that's one of the very special part. And we were still then very Scandinavian educated designer, that like design should be functional. So we made we suggest to make a table and stool with their amazing kokeshi door. One master, Igarashi-san, accepted the idea, okay, let's make a chair. But one master said, no, kokeshi will have very stress on his head. And we learned a lot from that sentence. We designed something else. We like when the master or factory says, no, bad idea. Then we somehow like, really? Then we go back hotel and then make something new, because that's, if they say, let's make, then it's like there's no learning. But if they say no, then, So anyway, through one rejection, we made some other design.
Difficulties is good. It's too easy. It's not worth it. But here the process of making, it's so specific, the way and the kind of ritual how you do things. So we kind of came up with this concept that all items they have good spirits when they are made with the thought and with the good spirit. So here we try to illustrate the rotating techniques of the kokeshi making. Here with another master, a set of trees that we, for the exhibition, we made these alive spirits that were kind of illustrating the motion.
Yeah, when we explain this to our colleague in Finland or USA, they are like, so they are the ghost or what? It was very difficult to explain the object has a spirit inside. But then when we explained this in Japan for exhibition opening, the volunteers came to do this spirit catwalk, and we explained, yeah, you are expressing the spirit in this object, and they're like, yes. It's like common sense, like Icelanders knows that we have a spirit in the nature and so on. So that was really fun opening ceremony.
Sorry for the Finnish people, we are a bit simple-minded.
Oh, sorry. Oops.
You forgot? Okay, let's visit Russia next. This is really heartbreaking to see the current events there. Terribly miss all of our Russian makers and lovely people who now suffer from the horrible leaders. This will show how traditional matryoshkas has been making. We've been making that over 10 years. This is Master Alexander, who makes from soft lime tree. You turn wooden dolls, and here is Mrs. Kruglova. Then next bathe them in the potato starch and dries them. That creates a kind of film where you can then do a delicate painting on the dolls. Painting by itself is created usually by different masters. So one master specializes in one part and then hands it over to the next one, who then continues the artwork.
We asked, why don't you make one whole painting? And they say, then it becomes too personal expression. When we divide by many, it becomes the customer owners can then put themselves so it becomes more like general. And when they paint, they don't think I'm painting the face. They say I'm dancing their hands. And that was amazing lecture about painting and design and beauty.
And how craft is being created. Finally, it's applied. It's dipped several times in lacquer to create the shiny surface. And then you sand the bottom to make it stand upright. We design many things, not actually matryoshkas, but since being designers and functionalists, we made stools, we made bags and different kinds using this technique. And finally, we then had the courage to design matryoshkas ourselves. This is an homage called Masters of Matryoshka. It's a portrait of the people we just met, from Master Alexander Woodturner to Mrs. Kruglova, and all the way to a traditional set of matryoshkas in the end. It's like almost like icon painting of the masters.
And it's like our portrait, our painting of them, but when they make and paint, it's like their self-portrait. So it's like many layers of mirrors and love and endless love.
Yeah. So we learned a lot from the masters, also that there's so much similarities between the makers, the way they live life, and how different crafts are made in different parts of the world. This was part of our exhibition where we had this wall of icons as video presentations, masters making their work, and this kind of set us to another journey that we titled The Universal Spirit. So this starts again from Japan, where we meet Kokeshi master Abo in Kuroishi. He makes the kind of core for our project Universal Spirit, a Kokeshi doll. We go then back to Russia, where we meet Igor Napilov, who creates clothing with matryoshka technique for our spirit. And then again we travel to Mexico, this time to Oaxaca, to meet the traditional tin master Don Tomas, and he creates this kind of armor for our spirit. And finally, we return to Finland, and in Nuutajärvi, we work with glass-blowing masters and create the final layer, a kind of aura for the universal spirit.
So it's like, yeah, universal spirit, that there is Miss Universe and Eurovision, like there's many countries. We are all divided, yes, but we are not, like we are also overlapped. Like I'm originally from South Korea, my passport is South Korean, but I'm Finnish, and I love Russia, I love Japan, I love Iceland, really. I'm not just saying because I'm in Iceland. I mean, we are not anymore like one single nationality, and why we are like fighting, like, anyway, so this is all about, we go over universe.
So we had this as an illustration of masters coming together in how do you say, installment in exhibition we call the Holy Factory, where we meet all the masters representing different technique and making the universal spirit in the center. And we had the chance to invite and get all the masters you met to be physically there, set a small factory and show the Finnish audience how these crafts are being made.
And the sound was collected by Tuomas Toivonen, and it was making amazing ambient sound, so the making of sound became the crazy sound of the holiness, and it became like a rock festival. Like we had one day like 8,000 people like passing, like staying in this space, and yeah.
So this is our holy factory. We are also kiosk keepers. We have a tiny shop in Helsinki. It's a very good concrete way of keeping up the work with the masters. We sell these things, so we can, as long as the master is working and making these things, as long we will keep selling it. When that ends, we stop selling the item.
People sometimes still ask, is it pop-up store? Oh my God, like this is 14-year-old store. And I don't like the word pop-up, I like pop-down.
Yeah. The shop is like, it's kind of difficult teenager. It's endless amount of problems from leaking roof and all kind of things. We own the building, so it's not a good idea to own things. So over the years, it's kind of ever expanding amount of items, but we feel so lucky that we've met all of these masters, and we kind of, through this shop, we have like kind of great excuse just to meet fantastic people, and then to also get to work with them, and learning from different cultures, and it's been really great. And then 2 years ago, all of this stopped. We couldn't travel anymore, and we thought, what should we do now? Whom can we meet? From whom can we learn? What do we do next? And we had kind of been thinking this project called Secrets of Imagination Land. So we set on this journey into our own heads. This is a map of Imagination Land and the different places we visited. So we learned various things, like you have to treat the raw materials better. Like in this place, it's called Particle Land. It's made of these small particles that work like bricks, but then able to like get them to work, you have to entertain them, energize them. Otherwise they get lazy and they just crumble down, and you have to really treat well the materials that you use. And we learn other things. We travel next to a place called the Sunny Valley.
My favorite place.
Everything grows like really big. This is, but actually only because the people who live there, they live like incredibly slow pace of life. So that makes everything around them grow really quickly and provide a lot of food for everybody. So slowing down might increase productivity, something like that. Finally, we visited Cosmic Factory, where we learned something about maybe circular economy, how everything just rotates around and around from molecules becoming structures and elements, and then the cycle just starts again and again and again. We made this video with a dear friend of ours, Ville Vainio. And this is our journey. Now we are in Imagination Land. We don't know where we can travel next. At least now we came to Iceland, so it's a good start for that. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Amo and Johan. Such an inspiring lecture. I have just about 100 questions after this, and I want to encourage you to take part in question asking. Make use of this wonderful opportunity. We had a hiccup in the password to our Slido app it is DT 2022. So sli.do in your browser and DT 2022 as stated in the graphics. But on to just a short question before we go on a coffee break. I loved your phrasing of falling in love with a culture. And there's been a lot of discussion, from my part at least, about how you can get to know a different culture and how you treat it with respect and your attitudes towards it. And sort of gracefully and respectfully join a culture or step into it without interfering or taking a higher vantage point. How do you immerse yourself, like you've clearly done, in a new and a different culture? How do you go about falling in love with it?
I think... no, please.
Well, we call the series Secrets Of. And I think ignorance is very good. It kind of started us for like not really knowing much of the culture that we are going. So then you kind of go without any pre-ideas. Like, yeah.
I think some people ask, why first Finland? What's the order? What's next country? And why? And then actually there's no logic. It's just totally like coincidence or actually even I'm from South Korea. I was not at all interested in Japan, but after learning Russian culture, like Japan looked like through Russia, Japan was like coming, wow, their culture, and then so on, and like you fall in love with someone, and then you don't have to explain like my CV or I studied here, blah blah. But if you fall in love, you just like, I mean, I talk with my dog. I don't speak like dog language. She doesn't speak Finnish or Korean, but we are like, oh. So in many cases we find first like object, and then like, oh my God, what is it? And then, okay, this is made in Mexico, really? Like, who makes it? And then, like, usually object bring us, because we are like object people, like object bring us to the country, and then we go through like history and language and food and music, and then go really to meet who made this and so on. So it's again like this kind of love or respect, or like I want to know who made that, and that will is so strong that I think also when they see us, they maybe like see that how much we like their object, and we are not having a driver or business plan, but we just come with our backpack, so they let us in and show all the secrets.
Yeah, that's right. So it's a beautiful approach and a beautiful idea. When you fall in love with somebody, you don't ask them about their CV. That's a valuable takeaway point. I won't disturb you any longer. You can make use of the coffee break and ask them more questions if you'd like. It's a 20-minute coffee break until 10 to 11. Go enjoy, have a cup of coffee, take a piss. See you 10 to 11.
Þetta í sinni allra einföldustu mynd fullkomin hringrás. Við tökum á móti plasti og skilum sama plastið tilbaka nema við erum búin að umbreyta forminu í nýja nytjahluti. Samstarfið við Iceland það kemur til núna í tengslu við Hönnunarmars. Þeim langaði til að nýta tækifærið og búa til eitthvað skemmtilegt efni í tengslu við hönnunarhátíðina og tengjast þá hönnunarsamfélaginu meira. Í upphafi samstarfs þá byrjum við alltaf á þarfagreiningu til að átta okkur á og kynna samstarfsaðilum eins vel hægt og reyna að virka sem flesta í þessu ferli. Virka þau í endurvinnsluferlinu, virka þau að vera meðvituð hvað þau eru að nota og fá þá inn hugmyndir og reyna kannski að koma augu á vandamál sem þau hafa vanist svo lengi að þau eru hætt að taka eftir. Síðan hönnum við flokkunarkerfi sem við hvetjum alla starfsmenn til þess að nýta. Og það plast sem fellur til í þetta flokkunarkerfi, það verður hráefnið sem við síðan nýtum í sköpunina. Allir hugmyndafundir og allt gengur voðalega greitt og vel fyrir sig og okkur fannst það kjörið til að reyna að kreista út einhverja skemmtilegar hugmyndir og þannig var þess að fyrsta afurð til sem töskumerking fyrir viðskiptavini Icelandair. Í raun og veru viljum við að bara í hvert sinn sem kemur upp einhver þörf hjá Icelandair að í staðinn fyrir að sé farið í framleiðslu úr einhverjum nýjum efnum að þá sé endurunnið plast nýtt og að þar komum við sterkir inn. Og það er svona pönslæni með þessu öllu. Að plast getur verið verðmætt hráefni og við erum bara að reyna að predikera og kenna það í gegnum þessi samstörf.
Creativity is just one single cell in my body or one oasis of ideas.
Mistakes can be so inspiring and that works really well for me because I do make a lot of mistakes.
Being realistic kind of breaks creative process, so it's good to park it and leave it behind a bit while you just get a flow on.
I wake up excited when I have a new project and a new material that I am exploring.
Iceland is small, so we have to be able to do everything.
That's probably one of the things that made working here so interesting.
I've sort of become obsessed with Icelandic walls.
Design is much more than making ugly things pretty.
What is the spirit of Iceland?
Yeah, it's a really difficult question because does anyone know the answer?
I guess the spirit of Iceland is chaos, chaos.
I think for me it's very obvious.
It's passionate.
Very positive attitude.
It's exaggerated. Free styling summer. There's this freedom and there's this carelessness and there's playfulness and it really allows you to explore and be curious. And I think curiosity is like my main drive.
You're kind of raised within the spirit that you can do whatever you like.
There's a lot of optimism.
Extreme optimism. Just do it, you know. Nike. We have to cut that out, I guess.
Why not attitude and just go and do it?
If you want to do something, you'll just have to find a way to do it yourself.
It's a massive driving force, and that's what enables me and probably more people around me to strive for goals that seem kind of unattainable.
Naive. I think it's a mix of confidence and naivety, definitely both, and both works in a way, so.
It's somehow imprinted in us that we just believe that things will just be fine somehow.
Something that really pushes you and makes you think that you can do anything, and you just go and do it.
Chaos.
Very closely related to our natural environments and the change of seasons.
Catastrophic weather, erupting volcanoes, earthquakes, the wrath of the sea.
I was very influenced by my walk to the volcano the other day, where you really get to experience the spirit of Iceland, really.
So I think the spirit of Iceland could be a sweater that has been stained. It has this like crazy life of like eating hot dogs and enjoying like the crazy Sundays where you get a bit like crazy and like spill all over yourself in the wind. But it also needs some kind of mending too. But it can be fun, the way we will mend the spirit.
My source of creativity probably comes from archaeology, and a lot of my time is spent on listening to old audio tapes, just trying to get a glimpse of something that is in the past.
There's a lot in our past that can help us move forward to the future.
So many creative people here to work on different creative things, so I feel like a lot of people are illustrator and a singer in a band or something. Like they usually have two different creative jobs. So, and I think that's really important because that always complements the other.
Island fever.
We tend to forget about it, how isolated we are.
I think you kind of have to leave and come back to realize what we have here. And all of a sudden you start seeing things you didn't see before. And how the sky is always in front of you and there's this endless amount of space.
And everybody is kind of trying to help each other out and so on.
There's never too much of a distance.
So if I need something in particular, I just call the CEO of whatever company. If I need to get my foot in a door, or if I need some specific material or a machine, I'm always somehow able to squeeze in.
So easy.
There was 4,000 students every year that graduated from textile design in the UK. Well, in Iceland, it's 12 students every other year that graduate from textile design, so it's really different.
Being Icelandic is just like being from the world, I guess. But being in Iceland, I think that is what affects me the most, because you take in the environment, but my nationality has nothing to do with it.
I would say that weather rules my life. And that translates into my designs. And 9 months of the year, it's dark and it's cold.
The seasons affect me more than necessarily just the weather. The dark winters can be quite difficult.
But we are also extremely optimistic about it, because you kind of have to be if you are going to live here.
If we can work through Icelandic weather, we can do anything.
One of the fantastic things about Iceland and working in this landscape settings is that it's so versatile.
You know, you drive from one part of the country to another one, and the scenery just completely changes. And on top of that, you have these sudden weather changes, and you're always experiencing something new.
It's all about these very simple things. Just the lava, it's the moss, it's the water.
It's actually a beneficial how young design in a way is in Iceland, because we are not trapped in tradition.
So it's a more free-spirited kind of...
We are sort of creating our field as we go. And
the fun thing about tradition is how you can break them.
I can believe that it can be hard to break out of it, but here we are so free.
We haven't been doing this for centuries, and we have to come up with new solutions.
The experimental and humor and everything is still an integral part of everything that designers in Iceland do. So everything is kind of allowed, and maybe that's our tradition, that we experiment.
I try to find solutions to societal problems.
If you're going to create anything, then we have to take sustainability and environmental factors into the mix.
You can't be in our profession today without thinking about this in every single project.
In a way, this fuels my creativity, because I take something really technological and structured, like mathematical, symmetrical pattern generator, and combine it with something really natural and Icelandic, like the ink made from crowberries.
I've been collaborating with the Red Cross, and I get the sweaters they get in that have holes or stains on them, and they can't sell them. So instead of sending them away to we don't know where, I take them and take care of them and make them last longer, because that's the most sustainable way of making sustainable fashion, I think.
I focus on knitwear, and I use the Icelandic wool. It's locally sourced, locally produced, locally designed, so the carbon footprint is minimum.
Here in my shed, I'm creating a turntable. It's made from Icelandic materials, which are quite rare.
Sustain sustainability is really important in my process, and I think it should be important for every designer in their project. For example, with the project Bioplastic Skin, it's basically making plastic-like material out of animal hides to make packaging for meat.
We collaborate with various local companies and we pick up their plastic weekly and we return the same plastic back to those companies but in different form. So we create new products and solutions from the waste plastic.
People can also come here and adopt sweaters from the Red Cross if they promise to take care of them and use them.
Talking about meat consumption and the plastic waste that follows it, and it's like a platform for debate and discussion, and I think that is one of the greatest tools designers have.
Designers should be like a driving force for societal change, and that's maybe kind of a heavy burden to bear, but I feel like it's very definitely our role to change the outlook of society.
Because we only have one world and everything.
To me, if I was to choose a sentence or a word, it would be probably something in the line of, why not? Yeah, why not? Everything is possible.
Yeah, that's a nice way to put it.
Can we start again?
No, maybe not. No, I think we're good.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Chaos.
All right, all right, all right. It is time to take the last sip of coffee and re-enter the podium. I can just see it in your faces that you're all caffeinated up, chirpy, and ready to go for the second session. Still chatting away. I hope that's questions being asked live on location, because I'm about to introduce the next speaker, something you would not want to miss. You maybe heard the cowbells out there. It's a designed, rugged way of calling you back in. All right. It is an honor and a joy to introduce the next speaker. She's called Ragna Sara Jónsdóttir, and she is the founder and creative director of Folk Reykjavik. She founded Folk with the aim to create a brand that will be a platform for Icelandic designers to create products contributing to a more sustainable lifestyle. Ragna Sara has, for the past 5 years at Folk, worked on the interconnection between design, sustainability, production, and the circularity of materials. In her previous career, she founded Development Program and the Icelandic Ministry of Foreign Affairs, and then became Director of Communication and later of Social Responsibility at Iceland's state-owned energy company, Landsvirkjun. Sounds like a person you just about trust with your life, doesn't she? Let's welcome Ragna Sara to the stage with an applause and then a silence. Welcome, Ragna Sara.
Thank you, Guðrún, and hello to DesignTalks. It's a pleasure to be here today to kick off a great DesignMarch 2022. We have all been waiting for this for 2 years. I don't think I have to lecture you about global climate change. We all know that if we do not mitigate the effects of them, it will have devastating impacts: hotter climate, more severe weather conditions, drought, forest fires, etc. And we have other environmental problems too, like decreasing biological diversity, plastic pollution, and microplastic. We definitely need a transition to a greener and cleaner environment. Physical products are the largest direct source of CO2 emissions by households in Denmark. They are around 35% of a person's consumption. However, we are entering a new reality where it will be harder to introduce products that are damaging to the environment. Companies are being held accountable for their CO2 emissions. Cities are committing to climate neutrality. Sweden is imposing carbon consumption quotas, and the EU introduced a new circular economy package last month. That includes a ban or so too on fast fashion. There are no more claims that can be made soon of sustainable products without substantial evidence from companies. And there is intense focus on circularity and circular business model. So, what role can design play in this transition? Does it have a role? Do you as designers have a role? The answer is yes, an imperative role. Research shows that 80% of a product's environmental impacts are determined at its design phase. So for a lot of the impact, design has a role, be it reducing waste from production, extending the durability of the product, or reducing its CO2 footprint. This will happen in the design phase. Actually, there are numerous ways for designers and design companies to have positive impact. This is a good model by the Lifestyle and Design Cluster in Copenhagen, used to assess the circularity of a product. It gives a good idea of the many ways of reducing our reliance on virgin materials, such as sourcing materials, designing for circularity, disassembly, and the recycling and reuse. Actually, I will be participating in the Design Cluster's exhibition with folk in the Design Museum in Copenhagen next month during 3 days of design. So if any of you are there, so please stop by. A simpler way to describe the circular economy is through this model on the right. Design based on it will lead us to the much needed transition to a circular economy. In fact, every producer's biggest fear should be that their product will end in the landfill container. That is a destiny we don't want. So we should all avoid that. And we can achieve changes on so many levels. Actually, we don't need to wait for a new technology to solve our problems. We can start today to redesign the world's products and processes to minimize CO2 emissions and waste. I want to tell you a little bit about my own personal journey and the design platform I created, Folk, to create an impact. It started in 2017. I'm not a designer. I'm an anthropologist, and I worked as a sustainability director at a large company. But I felt I needed to dig better into the possible impacts that could be made at the product level and the consumption level, because I felt that we as consumers forget everything about sustainability or circularity when we go into the store. We tend to choose products from looks and price. So how can we engage consumers with their buying decisions being based on sustainability and circularity and improving the environment at the same time? So the goal of the startup company Folk was to increase sustainability into the processes of product design and development, and to empower and partner up with Icelandic designers, because there was no such a brand in Iceland that was engaging designers in their work. So ultimately, we wanted to become a platform for folks' products internationally. So from the start, our focus was on improvements on sustainability. So we put down principles to guide our work. We focused on the materials in our products, making them from certified or recycled materials whenever possible. We tried to eliminate the use of toxic materials and make durable products that could be mounted and disassembled over and over again without the product being damaged. So by doing that, we could pass down the products to next generations. We also focus on using minimum material and design each product for multiple purposes. And as the plan was always from the start to become an international company, in 2019, we participated in our first trade shows. We went twice to Maison et Objet in Paris and to Stockholm Furniture Fair. And today, Folk has a warehouse in mainland Europe, and we are preparing to expand in the European market. We have agents in Germany, in the UK, and Finland. We work with suppliers in several countries in Europe, in Portugal, Italy, Poland, and Czech Republic. To date, we have teamed up with 6 teams of designers or on different projects. So from top left and clockwise, they are Ragna Ragnarsdóttir, Studio Flétta, Tinna Gunnarsdóttir, Theodora Alfredsdóttir, Ólína Rögnudóttir, and Jón Helgi Holmgeirsson. And I am super grateful and fortunate to work with this group of talented people. Our dynamic relationships are important because we have different focuses. The projects they need to solve, they're not always easy. Design a sculptural object with more than one function, could be one project. Design a wall shelf out of as little material as you can use and more functions than a regular shelf, okay? Design an object from a car part that cannot be resold. These are the examples of projects the designers have gotten from us and solved in a very clever way. In 2020, when COVID hit and international sales and marketing activity so too stopped, our focus shifted more locally and towards increased experiments of circular products and plugging into waste streams to create new designs. We partnered up with veteran designer Tinna Gunnarsdóttir and casting workshop Malmsteypan Hella. Malmsteypan has scrap from their aluminium casting production and other metal scrap. We wanted to use it. So the objective was to design simple but multifunctional objects from aluminium scrap. And we were working with a third generation of metal craftsmanship, so it was a true honor to work with them. And the ingredients are all known, fully transparent. They are different car parts and scrap from the workshop, car bumpers, rims, and general leftovers. And the whole process is powered with 100% renewable energy here in Iceland. The result are the multifunctional platforms designed by Tinna. We also went into a collaboration with a car part sale, Netpartar. They are doing an extremely good job in circular terms. They are reselling high amounts of car parts from destroyed cars. However, not all is sellable. So the objective was to find leftover materials and reuse it for new product streams. We teamed up with the talented designers at Studio Flétta, a very difficult task, and they solved it in a brilliant way. They found textile hanging out from the steering wheel of some of the cars that were embroidered and in beautiful pastel colors. So when we embarked on this project, we didn't expect a pastel-colored soft item coming from this mission. But these are the airbags, cushions or pillows, or use them how you want. Brilliantly designed by Studio Flétta, and the filling is recycled duvets from the Red Cross. So 100% reuse. So a lot is happening in the world with regard to development of new materials, of recycled materials. And this project is an example of how we plug into one of many ready-made circular materials. Here we teamed up with the Danish company Kvadrat Really to use some of their materials made from recycled textiles. These would otherwise go to a landfill or be incinerated. The designers are Theodora Alfredsdóttir and Jón Helgi Holmgeirsson. Here you see a lamp from upcycled textile by Theodora and a coffee table by Jón Helgi. And we feel it is important to create knowledge about how these new recycled materials can be used so they can be mainstreamed as fast as possible. A shelf and a coffee table by Jón Helgi, made from the upcycled textile boards from Kvadrat Really, and they will soon be available at stores. Stone is a material that can be widely found in Iceland. It does not have to come from mines to be utilizable. In Iceland, where we have renewable energy, it can also be manufactured in a CO2 neutral manner. So stone is being digged up every day, in digging grounds and moved around to get disposed of. So we can certainly plug into that and use some of it for nice designs. Here, designs by Ólína Rögnudóttir from local Icelandic stone, some reclaimed from Landspítali Hospital digging ground, and some from private ownership. So when we work with recycled materials, I think it's important that we do not encourage more consumption of virgin materials. We need to make sure that this is a sustainable process and that we are not supporting more unsustainable production, so that the recycling sort of becomes an excuse for producing more. We need to avoid that. We also need to bear in mind that reducing consumption in general is also an important task. So, you design, others measure. Measurements are important to make the right choices and to educate the consumers. We are working with the Danish company Molba to measure the carbon footprint of all our products. This is an ongoing project and will be finished in the fall. And this is also important to guide our product development. And to become successful in decreasing CO2 footprint, we need to start today to educate ourselves about it, sort of increasing our carbon literacy, so to say. But I think it will be an easier task than we think. In the food industry, we are used to getting detailed ingredient lists on all food packaging. And given the emphasis of regulators and new directives, it wouldn't surprise me that without long we would have similar demands for the furniture industry. And we can do it today. We are heading for this kind of transparency and more for the benefit of our environment. So this is my vision of product transparency, clearly stating the CO2 emissions of the product and factors in production that are contributing to the footprint. Then showing what the CO2 emissions of the product equals to in comparison with other consumption. For example, a shelf's footprint could be equal to the emission of driving 46 kilometers in a car. And this is something the Molba tool helps us to do already today and contributes to the education of consumers. And last but not least, the transparent ticket should include a detailed list of ingredients. You're welcome to learn more about our vision of this at our showroom and exhibition at Hafnartorg, very close by, during DesignMarch. The green transition will have to be a collaborative effort by designers, design companies, the suppliers, retailers, and others in the value chain. A close collaboration of all in the value chain will enable us to make important changes. All research shows that consumers want to make a positive impact, and it is our role as an industry to deliver them smart green products, educate them, and increase transparency for the benefit of the environment and the climate. Thank you.
That's that. On we go. Next up is Anders Lendager. He's a sustainability pioneer and co-founder of award-winning architectural firm Lendager Group. The firm has established itself as one of the most influential companies in Denmark in regards to sustainable architecture. Anders Lendager has mastered the art of rethinking the foundation of how we go about construction projects and how to generate new methods for upcycling materials, thus creating a healthy green and circular world for us all. Anders tale her i dag er selvfølgelig på dansk, vores gamle sprog og vores yndlingssprog her i Iceland. Just kidding, not a word of Danish today, at least for these two. Welcome, Anders.
Ja, det er fantastisk at være her i dag. Jeg kommer til at tale på dansk det meste af tiden. Jeg håber, I kan følge med. Hang on. All right, so thank you so much for having me today. I mean, truly, this is both a very big honor, but also just to be here today with so many people. It feels so good, doesn't it? I mean, it hasn't been this way for so long, and now we can be together. So I hope you enjoy this, just the social spirit of this, talking about sustainability. I have to log on. See? There we go. All right. So thank you, and also I want to say thank you for my family to come here with me, Tina, Laura, Emilia, and Liliellen, and also a very big thanks to Arnhildur Palmadottir that sits here, that kind of connected me more to Iceland. And now she's going to be my partner in Lendager here on Iceland. So hopefully we can together work on projects and accelerate the transition to regenerative architecture. And that's what I'm going to talk about today. And I'm really going to speed up. I have so much I want to show you. I'm an architect. I've been working on circularity for the most of my career. Let's see if I can actually get this to work before. Otherwise, it's going to take a long time. What we are going to talk about today, or at least what I want to show you, is this. It's called the invention of natural or unnatural systems. And it's something that's really interested me for a long time, because what is it that's actually happening now? Everyone talks about circularity, cradle to cradle, all these kind of systems. But what is it that's actually missing? Why is it the transition is so difficult? And what Folk just showed us before, fantastic and beautiful. And also this film of demolition, which unfortunately was very, very beautiful. The fact of the matter is that it's not a very beautiful thing. It's disruptive, and it's unsystemic, and it's useless in the way of looking at resources. So that's what I'm going to talk about today. And I'm just going to start with learning a little bit from history. Learning from this guy, Alexander von Humboldt. You might know him, but you might also not know him. He looked at nature in a different way. He was an explorer in the 1969 and forward when he started working as a philosopher scientist. He traveled around, and what he actually did was to look at nature. And he was the first one who actually saw that if you took a part out of the ecosystem, it started to fall apart. And for us today, it's obvious. If you take a bee out, the flowers dies, the animals dies, and the ecosystem is disrupted and broken. But he was the first one, and he connected science, philosophy, art, innovation. And that's what we really need to do. Because when we look at how we've broken up the systems, we need to discover how they're put together. And this is how he did it. Traveled around making these discoveries. Many of these drawings is collecting data. And at that time, you didn't really know how to collect this data or communicate it. But this was the way that he started to understand the ecosystem around the world. Beautiful, beautiful drawings that gave us data to understand how the natural systems are connected. And they're complex. They are super, super complex. And even today, we don't really know if we have everything covered, but we know quite a lot. But the interesting part, and why this bridges to what we're doing today and are talking about, is do we really know the new unnatural natural system? Do we understand when we demolish things and we take out materials that is waste and comes from somewhere else with chemistry in it that's difficult to work with, what do we take out of the system and how do we bring it back in? if it's from design to buildings, infrastructure, food. We need to discover and invent that system, and that's super difficult, and that's why it takes so much time. So there's 3 numbers that, and this is in Danish, I apologize. There's 3 numbers that are super important, and I know that you've seen like all the things that we need to save on CO2, but I'm still going to bring this one forward. 51 billion tons of CO2 is emitted every year. That's a lot. And it's not that we have to go to 0 on this journey, but we have to deduct it by 70%. And 70%, that is really, really a lot. Think about something that you did today that you reduced by 70%. For me, it's only doing sports that's possible to just cut it off to a 0. But eat less, do things less, work less, be less with your family, just to understand the scope of what we're looking into. It is a paradigm shift where it's not only that we take waste and make it useful, it's that the politicians need to change their way and mindsets. Behavior has to change. We have to set the bar differently. Economic systems need to change as well, and it's going super slow. And that's the problem. So we need to go almost to 0, and that is some of a challenge. So just to understand what linear is, I tried to draw it up and where I started. I started being an architect. But being an architect 10 years ago, working with circularity wasn't really enough to solve sustainability, because our clients didn't know what the hell I was talking about. Or just looking at time, when is this guy gonna leave? And when you talk with material manufacturers, they were like, why should we ever do concrete a different way? I mean, we've sold everything in the next 5 years, so why should we change? So I had to invent a new system. Also, the architecture trade. We are only architects, monocultures, engineers, monocultures, and so on. That's not the way forward. We need to mix it. It's a totally different also organization that solves these things. So I invented a molecule that had circular advising, that helped clients to understand sustainability. We could then throw the ideas up to the architects that would start to design and materialize the idea. And in the end, we came up with ideas of materials that needed to be invented, so I had to have a new company called Linear Up that created circular materials. So I ended up owning a lot of different companies. I had my own upcycled bricks, windmills, upcycled wood, concrete, and so on. And I delivered the materials for the project I'm going to show to you. And the interesting part is that I ended up selling these innovations to a new kind of company, where Pandora, the family that are doing jewelry, they bought it. And now we're scaling it up in Denmark. It's an economy that no one thought would be there. And this is the strength of circularity. There are business opportunities that creates CO2 reduction and more sustainability. You just have to be open-minded for it. So this is the first house we did, a single family house 10 years ago. Everything was made, well, 90% was made out of upcycled or waste materials, upcycled. And the house looked weird, they thought, in Denmark. It did look weird. It's made of weird things. Containers, a kind of a fake skating area thing that was cut up for the foundation. Aluminum, as you know so well, that you can recycle. Paper, it's the black parts. Inside there was linen from hospitals, plastic things and so on. This is 10 years ago. So it was a little bit more, forefront than it is today. But we saved 86% CO2 compared to a normal single family house. And it didn't cost more. And that started to be interesting for developers, one. And that one we asked to do a couple of projects. And we did Ressourcerækkerne, which is this one. And we're really happy that it's been nominated. But it's interesting that waste has been nominated. The facades here are old buildings that are cut up. It's from the 60s and until today, where the problem with bricks is that you can't take them apart. So the only part that we know from history we can recycle, we use concrete to put together. That's brilliant. And then you can't take them apart. So we came up with this idea about cutting square meter parts up, and no one thought that was possible, so that's why I did the company. And hired bricklayers in, and architects and bricklayers. It was a fun time. And we could see that we saved so much CO2, we understood that also the mortar has a lot of CO2 in it. And we never talk about that, we just talk about the brick. And then it came out to look like this, where the different colors is different buildings that we harvested. And it was super difficult to find the right buildings and get there in time, because normally you have 2 weeks, then you have to demolish everything, as we saw before. But all of a sudden, a design came out of it. And this design was not only the bricks, it was also this bridge, a direct reuse, a double-teed concrete beam, just taken from one building, transported, and put up on this building. And kudos to the engineers for calculating it. So all of a sudden, we started to have these materials that we could invent, build with, and sell to our clients and contracts. So it's a new type of economy that we had in the architectural practice. And even though in this project we only upcycled 10% of the materials, we had an almost 30% impact on CO2 for the whole building over a lifespan. So you can take the right focus, have an immense impact, and do new innovations and new type of architecture. And the interesting part was that this was 3% cheaper to build than a normal building. So what happened? It's not more expensive, like everyone else has said. So we did the next project as well. It was almost the same time, so we looked at different materials here, and it was both wood, concrete, and windows. Everything had to be waste. So it's crushed concrete that came from the metro station. I'm going to show that in a minute. And it was windows from social housing. And funny enough, in Denmark, social housing is the one that are doing the most energy kind of transition. And every time they refurbish the buildings, they take their old windows out, and these are only 15 years old. And the windows actually live for 50 years, and they perform well. So we invented this kind of double-layered window and used standard forms, or the forms that we get from the project. And then we put them together in this double-layered window, and it saved 87% CO2. We were super surprised, and it performed better than a 3-layered new window. So all of a sudden, again, a new innovation. And here, this is my concrete machine. In Denmark, this is uncommon because we make everything in modules on a factory. Here, I think this is more normal. But I had to buy that one, set up a concrete crew because people didn't think this was possible, and then cast on site. So all the walls, slabs, everything was produced by Lendager Group, which is architects, which is weird. And not more than half a year after, the concrete industry said, well, we can do that, no problem. And that's what I mean. You have to push the industry. I don't care if they are doing it and making money on it, but the fact of the matter is, if you don't push the industry, nothing happens. And that's why we did it. And the architecture also changed. There's no fillers, paints, or anything in it. It's only the chemistry in the concrete, in the wood, which is more natural chemistry. So the indoor environment also changed to the better. And here, it's a rough interior. Also, the wood was recycled. It came from denison offcut, so it was things that should have been incinerated. And the interesting part was that it was the fastest rented out row houses in Copenhagen the past many, many years. And people don't move out. So what does that mean? That means that it's a better business case than doing a not circular, sustainable building. And that's why they start to invest in sustainability. And these stories and lighthouse projects are so important. And here again, it was 1% cheaper to build. And it's so important to push this. But what and how do you find the materials? One of the tasks that our circular advising is doing so much is looking at materials and doing these material mappings. This is just an example from Oslo, where we're looking at Lille Akerby, and it's 280,000 square meters that needs to be demolished. But the buildings are only 18 years old. So it's both stupid, bad planning, and it's bad for the environment. But the client didn't want to go circular, so we needed to show them what this meant. So we found all the materials, made an IKEA catalog of all the materials, which they thought was funny because then they could laugh at the Swedes. They don't think it's funny in Sweden. We think it's funny too. But the great thing was that each component, we calculated the CO2, the price for recycling directly, the price for a new component that it would be used for instead. And all of a sudden, we started to understand a whole city area the potential of recycling that over the next 15 years. And we made an idea catalog showing how we could use it, obviously. And whoa, that was really, really quick. That was quicker than I could talk. And here, the economy. And the economy on this slide, they started with the backside always when you have clients. You probably know that. So they look at economy immediately. But 1.5 billion Norwegian crowns. That's interesting. Accumulated of all the building stock, you could see how much that's worth. And then you start planning. Then you start designing with these materials and creating the future building. I'm just going to go a little bit deeper in this. Kickstart is a project we just won in Berlin. What you're looking at here is a parking house in the middle of Berlin. It's not very interesting. Here it is. It's a shopping mall on the left, and then you have this massive parking structure. And normally, you demolish it just like you saw. But what if you could build with all of these materials locally? If you could cut things out, create new materials, building blocks, that you could design a new office building and retail area with. And so, it's teasing me. Here we are. So what we wanted to do was to cut these things out and make new structures for that. So we started, this is the visualization of the materials in hand. And we started looking at quality, quantity, understanding how much we had of every material. And when we do that, we always go in life cycle assessment-wise and see what do we have. And here immediately, before designing anything, we can see we don't have enough windows when we harvest locally. We almost have enough of concrete slabs, so we need to find solutions for that. But very early, we can also see our CO2 impact. So the light green is our impact. So there's so much to save. And the client is Signa. It's one of the very large German, Austrian companies. And we know when we use it for structural elements, we have a huge impact. 55% of the CO2 in a building is the structure. But also all the other surfaces have a very big potential. So what we often do is do this thorough analysis of all square meters, all surfaces, and then we take the surface area, look at the quantities, the potential of the materials, if they're in good or bad quality, and then we match it up with the design volume that we have. And when you do that, you start to understand the full potential of where you want to use what materials. And here, an analysis of how to reuse a really boring concrete parking area. And our solution was the last one, taking every second floor out, getting a 5-meter high floor space that's super flexible, and cutting the materials out in a way that we could use them. And so here's the analysis, creating these spaces. And here, an example of cutting concrete out. So instead of casting elements from somewhere else around Berlin, bringing it in, we cut them out in the shapes we need, and then we move them to the yellow area, which is a wood structure, and then we put the slabs in. So construction side is manufacturing side, which is building side. So this creates the loop that we have, and you can see that the red parts up there is what we cut out. That's our building parts, columns, slabs, and then we bring wood in as a carbon sink, as you probably also heard, that wood stores carbon. And this all together is the 3 best ways of building. 1, don't build anything, use what you have. 2, build with the materials that are on site. 3, build with wood. Then you have a possibility of creating a very regenerative, or as close you can get to regenerative building as of now. So here's just what we cut out. And these materials, even the most boring beams, becomes this self-bearer loading facade that you cut out that I think is really beautiful. And here, putting it together with the windows. And here, maybe you can guess what, it gives itself away. But we had 30 escalator stairs, and that's stainless steel. You use so much energy to create stainless steel, and it can become a facade. And here, working with that, but we didn't have more than to cover that centerpiece of the project. Here, sandstone, we have experience in cutting that out, so we're also harvesting that. Lots of steel and aluminum. And here the plan for the parking area, it almost gives away the plan, right? So you see where the light can come in, and where you have the dark spaces for actually creating an area for all the cores, elevators, and so on. So here the design, the analysis of the material starts to merge together and give us a design, kind of a, in my opinion, super beautiful building where the materials are loaded with information and narratives. It creates a new kind of architecture where you can see the traces from history, but it's totally reformed. And that's an interesting approach. That's what we see now again and again with these upcycled projects, that they have a certain kind of identity. It's new to us. It's a paradigm shift in what we call aesthetic architecture is, or where it comes from. And here, it's a food court in the bottom. Then there is different kinds of design stores, and on the top there's office buildings. But we always go very, very deep in this, and I can see the numbers are kind of, that's how complex it is. We have to write the numbers twice on top of each other. But this is our life cycle assessment. And for competition, we go in and calculate everything, and we show where it comes from, what is the carbon sink, what is the LCA on each of these materials that we work with, and what is the impact compared to a benchmark. And the benchmark is so important because it tells you what it would cost the environment to do it the normal way. And if you work with upcycling and work with recycling of this, you minimum save 50% CO2 when you do it this way. I've never gone under 50%, even though it's not that much you do. So that's very, very interesting. So how do we do it? Well, we do it by creating stages, and that is what our business in circular advising is doing: investigation, development, and implementation. You need to give the client and the user a feeling of how do you go from something extremely boring and complex to a new natural system, an ecosystem of materials, as we started talking about with Alexander von Humboldt. You need to understand the different supply chains, the value chains, and how you connect the dots to create this. And that's what we've spent 10 years doing. So we know and can tell our client all the boring parts. When do you test it? What does it cost? What is a mock-up? Who do you talk with? Fire, pressure, all these things. And it has everything to do with design and nothing to do with design, right? Because it allows us to do something different. And different it is to do a design like this. And we found a good reference as well. And here, the beams, we laid out how many beams do we have, where can we use them, and so on. So this is the way that we've gone about it. Here, the different slabs that are being cut out, craned out to a scaffolding, moved down to the courtyard, and then drive it 50 meters and bring it into the next new building. And this is experience that's important, and it's important that we talk to each other, that we inspire each other, and that data and these complex situations is something where we can actually help each other to succeed. Here, a section can show the complexity of it, and the interior, that everything else that's brought into this building site is made out of wood. Here, the interior that I really, really like, these high spaces that you can actually create, even sell offices for lawyers, if they're allowed to be in a sustainable building. I would personally kick them out. But, and here, other types of materials, textiles, plastics, as you probably heard about, that you can actually get this full interior now that's good enough. It handles acoustics, it handles fire. And then another project I'm just going to show you, which is wood. It's a high-rise that we're doing in Aarhus. It's a very complex building. It's 15,000 square meters. And in Denmark, you're not allowed to build more than 3 stories high wood buildings. So here again, we are challenging it quite a lot. And one of the things that we're also looking at is our pride and joy in Denmark of renewable energy, which is windmills. They do have a backdrop, this one. That's what you do with windmills. And that's not good. They have the same half-time as uranium when you put them in the ground, which is very bad. So we wanted to do something about it, and I have some nerds in the office, so every time I get slides, they put stuff in there. I was like, is that an intern, or is that? And But this is the slide showing how many windmills that we have that you're taking down, and this creates waste, a lot of waste. So we need to create solutions, and right now there are no solutions. So we started looking at the supply chain again, understanding what is it that they do today, and then create our own. And right now we are working with Siemens Gamesa on this, creating facade panels. This is a document, I'm just going to skip it. To this one, finding out where the windmills can be used as facade components, where it can be used for lamps, where it can be used for bicycle racks and so on. And all of a sudden, this beautiful shape becomes a beautiful potential. It's high value waste. And here you see Anton working on the project. He's really proud. He just cut that out himself. But it becomes the top here, as you see, the solar shading panels, and all the windows has a solar shading. And this, on the facade, is all waste sheets of metal. We found out that we can actually use corroded steel facades as well, because we now calculate the lifespan of a used sheet of metal. And again, this building is different types of sheets, and you know this very, very well here, so it's nothing new. But in Denmark, it is new to put on an exclusive office building to put recycled aluminum sheets on top. And there it goes again. I have to stay here. Yeah. So we are starting building this in 3 weeks. And the last project I'm going to show you is the Olympic Pavilion. The Carlsberg Brewery contacted us. They made a mistake. Well, they didn't think it was a mistake. I thought it was a mistake. They made this one. It's called the Draft Master. It's the revolution of beer. The only thing that's not that revolutionary is that they made this keg out of plastic with PP, PET, vinyl, aluminum, and a steel spring that you couldn't disassemble. And so when they came to us, this is what they had as problems. And we said, this is the most fantastic material. I mean, it's high, we know everything about it. It's high potential. So we started working and creating a recycled plastic that performs fantastic, that we could use for buildings. We could use it for so many things. And we created a new company called Replastic. And the Replastic was based on these kegs and 200 tons of plastic waste they have just in the beginning of rolling this idea out to the world. This is just in Denmark. And so we started finding out, what does it mean when we thread it? How can we separate things? How can we form things? And it's nothing new to work with recycled plastic, but it's new that you work with something that's has such complexity and create all kinds of designs out of it. So when we won the competition to do the design pavilion, the Danish pavilion in Tokyo, we said, okay, but what if we can take plastic waste that they have so much of and actually create a chair, a pavilion, disassemble it and have a chair again. So this is, then I started designing with our old classic chairs, and everybody thought that now he lost it. But it's strange that it goes from being something that embodies you, a chair, to being a structure. And it's quite easy to see, and when you have 2,500 chairs, it starts to be possible to do this. Unfortunately, it didn't happen in Tokyo, so we did it in Milan in the Leonardo da Vinci Museum and made a smaller edition of it. And now it's going to the Olympics in Paris, we hope. But here you see that something that's a building block can become something else. The last thing is here, and then I'm going to finish, is that when you do circular strategies, then we think it's for our world, the prosperous, the economy, the potential we have to kind of drive this forward. But we took the exact same process to Uganda in a huge refugee camp together with Care and Danita. And then we said, okay, what if all this plastic can be used for new building components? And we helped them to do this sheet, this roof sheet, and they started to produce them. And the production then became something they sold from the refugee camp for 8 crowns per sheet. First in the camp, then outside the camp, and then we ended importing it to Milan. And the fact of the matter is that you have such a big potential of actually using these ideas for a broad way of implementing circular economy. I have a small film. Do I have time to do that? 3 minutes? No? Good. It's also boring. All right, but thank you so much for having me.
Thank you so much,
Thank
Anders.
You're welcome.
If you'd like to come and sit down.
Yeah.
We're also going to invite Ragnar back to the stage, and also Kent Martinussen, who hasn't spoken today, but we're going to hear from him. We're going to have a discussion about the themes. Yeah, why don't you sit closest to me here, Anders? Look, sorry about not being able to show the film. Why don't you quickly tell us what the film was going to be about?
It was a recap of everything.
Okay.
Don't worry, you got it. No, yeah. So,
Kent,
I should be in the middle of the kiss.
do you want to sit on the beast there, the shaggy dog, or whatever it is? I'll introduce you in a minute, Kent, but Anders, first of all, a question for you. How many companies do you have?
I think I have 10 companies.
Oh my God!
And now one more with Arnhildur. But I also sold some of them. And basically, my dream was to show that this way of thinking could create an interest for kind of the economical side to invest in it. So it's never been for me about the economy or getting money from it. It's been about showing that you can scale this. And you need to have investors from the outside wanting to invest in circular economy to scale it. So that's been the experiment, and that's what's happening now.
Because we're all familiar with the design approach to things, the architectural approach, but the business approach is often the harder thing. You seem to be like a successful serial entrepreneur. Do all of your companies make money?
No, none of them.
How do you sell a company that doesn't make money?
No, well, you can say they do make money, but the interesting part here is that it's pilot projects. So if you look at many other industries where they are trying to do new types of innovations or new types of products, they accept to have a loss. When you work with recycling in the building sector, everyone expects you to be zero-sum or you don't want to do it. So our challenge was, obviously, we needed to make it a zero-sum game to do it the first time. And when you succeed with that, the product had actually shown its potential because second time is 60% cheaper to do. So that's, yeah.
Yeah, I think it's an overlooked truth that people who do design, who run their own studios, architecture companies, people like you, Ragnar, you're also business people, you're also entrepreneurs and in a competitive business world. So both of you to have succeeded, even if you're losing money, with what you do is really, really impressive. Kent, hello. Why don't you tell us who you are and what you do and why you're here? Since you didn't speak, you have a little chance to give a little talk now to introduce yourself.
Yesterday, maybe too much even. But my name is Kent Martinussen, and I'm a Danish architect by education. But I have worked for the last, well, many years, 20 years, as the director of the National Center for Architecture in Copenhagen. And we have actually set out, 20 years ago, a strategy which is to showcase and to debate how architecture design as a competency can contribute to a sustainable development in the world. At that time, around the turn of the millennium, it was quite obvious that the world was developing in a rapid way towards something that looked dangerous. Remember when Deng Xiaoping in '78 said being rich is being beautiful. One party, two system. We want the same as we have seen in Europe after the war, and that development, which we have actually seen illustrated here in the two previous presentations. Well, we all know it, but it also puts a huge pressure. That was quite obvious at that time. So that has been the main focus. But of course, maybe very important also, something I think we should discuss maybe, the power of aesthetics. So what does it mean to make transition? And how can we do it with the aesthetic as not as a single or a singular, but as a very important tool? And I would like to come back to that. I think it was quite impressive to see those two presentations. I'm quite sure others felt, well, okay, it's as if we're really on a hot plate, all of us, but just from 1 hour of presentation, don't worry. It's possible.
It's interesting that you mention aesthetics, because the aesthetic of a lot of your projects, it wears its recycled materials on its chest. It doesn't try and pretend it's like everything else. And Ragnar, you made an interesting comment. You said that consumers choose on looks and price, not sustainability. So how do you get around that? From your point of view, Ragnar, do you feel that your sustainable products have to look like unsustainable products, or can you persuade consumers that the sustainable look is actually more desirable?
Actually, I have to agree with Kent that aesthetics are the key here. And to gain the attention of the consumer, you need to focus on aesthetics. So they will not go for, or like maybe that's 2% of the people that will buy a product because it's sustainable. But if it's
2%, really?
It's not exact figures, but it's
no wonder your
very
businesses
low.
are doing so badly.
It's very low. But no, really, you go into the store, you're a really sustainably minded person, you go into the store and you want to buy something sustainable. You end up coming out with something cheap, good looking. And this is also how the system is set up and what we have to change. And meaning that we are all in this together. We need to sort of nudge the sustainability into what is in front of the consumers and how we present it. Like, I have been imagining, like, oh, why don't we have like recycled like supermarkets, or like we need to sort of like quickly go ahead in how like the buying system is set up, like, and we need to gain the attention of the consumer, in a different way. And I mean, with a collaborative effort, we can do it, but we need to focus on it.
Now, we're here in Iceland. We have speakers from Denmark, from Iceland, Norway was mentioned, Sweden was mentioned, but not in a particularly good way. But what is going on in this part of the world? Why are you so far ahead in your thinking about sustainability? That's the first part of my question. And the second part is, how do you then extend that to everywhere else, the places like where I come, the United Kingdom and the USA, which don't seem to be quite so interested? I'd like to hear all of your opinions on that. Maybe you want to go first, Anders?
Yeah, it's a good question. I mean, I think when I started doing this in Denmark, one of my arguments were that we didn't have any natural resources. Of course, that's kind of a lie, but I mean, we're not a production country in that sense. We're a farming country, and all of a sudden, when you look at the waste as a resource, you have accessibility to everything. And that mindset of producing from what you have in a progressive mindset towards sustainability is a very, very good cocktail. And I think that's one of the reasons that we are leading ahead in Nordic countries in this mindset. And also, I think we're touching on aesthetics, but we are really damn good designers and architects here. You are that in the UK as well. But
thank you.
I'm sorry. You really are. But the thing is that when you start to take something that's rubbish, something that's not desirable, and you mix that with very good designers, it creates beauty. Every fool can take, an oak plank and do something good with it. It's a little bit more difficult when it's shredded wood you find somewhere that's been outside in the weather for 2, 5, 10 years. So the ability to create quality out of something that's the ability to use your skills as designers and architects. And I do think that's where we have a good advantage.
I'd like to ask the same question to you, Ragnar. And why did you go down this route? Is it because it's in your community, your family, or does the government help you? How did these ideas come out of this region?
Well, I just studied in Denmark, so.
Okay.
I got contaminated with the ideology that Ken put up. So, I mean, Denmark is very much ahead in this thinking and had set an agenda for us that we had to be in a green society by 2020. And, I mean, it's the only way to go forward. I mean, it's just basic if you think about it. So you can't really ignore it and continue. So I moved to Iceland and I continued to work on these ideas. I wanted to make a more impact. That's why I founded my own company and got people to work on the ideology together with me. So, yeah, but you need good designers, you need infrastructure, could have more support from, the government, yes, definitely.
And Kent, so over to you then, and I would like you to, we don't have much time left, but we have one export from Denmark's sustainability culture here in Ragnar. How can you encourage the stuff that you're talking about to become global?
Well, I think by being here today is the short answer, and Anders is around many places in the world. Hopefully you have a patient family, but the point being, of course, that it is about showing that it's possible. And that takes a lot of energy, not only doing it, developing it, but also actually preaching. Not old-fashioned, but showing that this is possible. And I think we have experienced within the last 5-10 years how all over the world seminars, debates, maybe not called DesignTalks, but of course you know them within sustainable urban development, seminars, conferences and so forth has just totally boomed. So I don't think we should idolize Denmark so much. There's a very specific story to why perhaps we are leading and has been for some decades actually, but we won't spend time on it now. I think more interestingly is actually that the world has, with the Paris Agreement as you showed, we actually agree now that this is not only necessary, but there are ways to do it. And I think that's probably what will really have the biggest impact, is that it's not only one or two who are fighting to convince the rest of the world. The world is more or less convinced, and I'm very optimistic here, but I think it is actually.
Great. We're out of time. Thank you all very, very much. And more conferences, but less flying to those conferences.
Yes, exactly.
Thank you. Thank you so much for this talk. We had a quick question through the Slido app for Anders. Where can we find your 3-minute movie online? The boring one.
The boring one. It will. I think it's on our website. Yeah, it's on our website, so you can see it. So yeah.
Which is
linear.com.
There we go.
Linear.com.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
So our next speaker is actually a beautiful connection to the discussion they just had. She sort of combines all of the elements that took most energy and time to discuss, and she's called Valdís Steinarsdóttir. She works in Iceland as an independent designer, mainly focusing on material experiments by recycling organic matter. In her work, she seeks to engage in a dialogue with her audience and strives to find unique solutions to social and environmental issues. Amongst other acknowledgement, Valdís was nominated for the Icelandic Presidential Innovation Award, shortlisted in Dezeen Awards in the category Emerging Designer of the Year, and was a winner of Formex Nova Award, Nordic Designer of the Year 2020. And she has actually been winning design awards all her life. Her very first one, and I had to dig deep for this, was a very innovative and useful guitar tree, a concept you can ask her about during lunch. But let's welcome the multi-awardee Valdís Steinarsdóttir.
Hi, really inspiring and nice day we have been having today, and it was a bit of a shock that you dug up my guitar tree. It was a nice surprise. I'm really proud of it. But yeah, I'm so happy to be with you today and excited to tell you about what I've been working on for the last couple of years. Some years ago, I began to look at the amount of usable waste materials produced by meat processing industry here in Iceland, and found it to be both an extremely hard and morally challenging topic to explore. But I felt obligated to try to find a way to showcase the significance of these materials. It's kind of weird to think about how young Iceland is and how short time has passed since people here lived in extremely harsh conditions. It was hard work to staying alive, and people had to utilize everything. And now, of course, things are better, but we have lost our connection to this utilization. And I think it's often good to look back and learn from the past to move forward. The first project I'm going to talk about is Just Bones. And like the name indicates, Just Bones is a project about developing a strong natural material entirely made from animal bones. I work with the bones in two ways. I make bone glue that works as a binder, and then I make bone ash by heating the bones and ground them down to fine powder. Then I mix these two back together. This results in a material similar in strength to synthetic wood, or MDF, after it has dried. It's liquid when mixed, so it can therefore be molded into any shape, similar to ceramics. You can also work with the material after it has hardened. You can, for example, drill it, saw it, laser cut, etc. And to give you a sense for the material, I want to show you a short ASMR clip to let you hear the material and experience it. Yeah, I wasn't lying when I said it was short. I can get various colors depending on different heating methods in the process of pulverizing the bones. I can get black, gray, and white variations. With higher heat, I get a lighter color. But I'm mainly focused on using the black option, simply because it requires the lowest heat. The material is strong as long as you keep it dry. You can dissolve it over time in water. It's a crucial part of all my material research to know how to discard of the material after it has been used. If you make something that lasts too long, you're only adding to the problem of an excess amount of materials that are piling up on our planet. And now I want to share with you some examples of what I made from the material and what I used for inspiration. Here you see a picture of an urn I made from the material. It almost feels ritualistic because undeniably this project deals with death, and I found myself wanting to embrace it rather than to stray away from it. When we here in the Nordic countries practiced paganism, graves of rich people were often filled with what is called hugfé, the person's most prized possessions, which they planned to take along to their afterlife. Horses were commonly buried with their owners, so since my urns are made out of horse bones, it is a bit like a modern-day hugfé. Another object I made from the material are small toy horses. Going back to what I was talking about earlier, back when we had to use the little we had, Icelandic children's toys were commonly animal bones. Different bones symbolize different animals. For example, jaw bones were horses. They collected the bones, and the goal was to make a big farm. So I decided to pay an homage to that part of our history and make my own version of a modern-day bone toy. And lastly, another inspiration I had for this material was a wedding I attended here in Iceland some years ago. The bride and groom were farmers, and the food for the whole wedding came from just one cow. And they were really proud of this cow. They took time in the wedding to have a little PowerPoint presentation where they talked about how wonderful this cow had been and the prize it had won for its beauty. And to me, the city kid, this was a fascinating experience. And this inspired me to start writing a book in collaboration with graphic designer Arnar Ingi Viðarsson, where I teach people how to make my bone material and the ritual surrounding the process. I envisioned that a group of people could have a big dinner party together. And from the leftover bones, next dinner could be prepared by making the dishes and cutlery from the bones. So full utilization becomes a part of the experience. And since most of us in this room live on an island where one has to be aware of materials, or perhaps the very lack of materials, it's important to explore discarded matter from different perspectives and find new opportunities for utilization. My aim is not to make more demand for animal products, rather to use what is already there to reduce waste and experiment with disposed matter to discover their full potential. And in the future, when we will stop mass farming animals, they will still be around, But when they die, it's my belief that we should fully utilize all natural materials. And that goes for myself as well. I definitely want all of my materials to be used after I am done with my body. I only make the material on a small scale, and I prepare the bones myself. It's important to me because I want to stay close to the process. These raw materials, often seen as byproducts, all have stories to tell, and I want them to be treated with as much care as the parts that are considered more valuable. And it's interesting how we discriminate against different byproducts. And I explore that further in my project Bioplastic Skin, which is a biodegradable packaging for meat made out of animal hides. With this project, I want to reflect on society's meat consumption and the question of waste that follows it. Meat consumption and use of excessive plastic have reached a critical point, and it's clear that societies need to rethink their consumeristic patterns. With this project, I want to open up a platform for discussion. To tell you a bit about how I make bioplastic skin, the process involves making rawhide and then boiling it to collect gelatin. People have been using this method for centuries to make wood glue, and now we modified this process in order to create a plastic-like material. And again, I want to let you hear the material so you can have a bit more sense for it. I'm now working with IceTech, a partner in technical innovation here in Iceland, to develop the mechanical reinforcements and improve the microbial resistance of the material. Our aim is to make the material not too durable, meaning it will only last as long as needed. For example, I would like the material to have the same expiration date as the meat inside it. So instead of a best before date, you could see if the packaging itself is turning bad to determine if the product inside is expiring. For me, the most interesting part of bioplastic skin is the thought process it can provoke within people. Due to the disruptive nature of the project, bioplastic skin forces you to make up your own mind about your personal beliefs and moral standards regarding the meat industry. This project provokes a reaction, and the reaction, I believe, can teach you valuable things about yourself. And I found it important to fully test this idea and to get to know the material better. And I think it was inevitable I would find other applications for the material. And that is what I did in my latest project. The last project I will talk about today is Shape Repeat. In this project, I'm going to focus on how to implement natural materials as biotextiles and mix them with new methods in garment making. The project Shape Repeat is a dialogue about how we manufacture clothes. Instead of cutting out patterns and sewing, a natural liquid material is molded into two-dimensional shape. When the material dries, the article clothing is mostly ready. Using this method, no extra clippings are made, just the exact amount of material needed for the garment. For this project, I'm building on top of the material research for bioplastic skin. I'm also experimenting with making clothes out of other natural materials that I will touch on later on. The idea came up many years ago when I was taking my first steps as a designer. I've always been a designer at heart, but originally I truly believed I was destined to become a fashion designer, which was far from the truth. I took a sewing class, but spent almost every minute trying to bypass the sewing machine, and to my teacher's understandable dismay. But I believe it's important to constantly reevaluate how we do things. This method of making clothes definitely challenges us to stop and rethink our current manufacturing methods. I've been experimenting with other natural materials alongside the gelatin I mentioned earlier. For example, material made out of algae. They have different exciting qualities, and I will continue to explore the other natural materials that might be suitable for this project. And it's exciting to use natural materials to replace synthetic ones, but still keep the plastic-like texture and feel, to make something that is in fact natural, but looks unnatural. When enough heat is applied, I can remelt the clothing. So when you want to change your clothing, you can melt it again and shape it into a new garment. If you feel the material has reached its final stage in its life cycle, you can let it decompose. But this project is still in its first steps, so there are still a lot of exciting ways to explore with this method, and the project could evolve drastically in the next few years. And now I've teamed up with the Icelandic outdoor fashion label 66 Degrees North. Together, we will take this project further and make it into a real product. Our goal is to make raincoats. So since the company started by making garments for fishermen, it's exciting to make the raincoat out of new sustainable materials from the sea. In my view, it's beautiful to make something for the future that is inspired by the past. And you can see our exhibition now at DesignMarch. And thank you so much for your time and for listening.
Thank you so much, Valdís. Saw some interesting food photos there. I don't know if they increased or reduced your appetite, but it doesn't really matter. Lunch is just across the corner, and they're serving gourmet soup from ugly veggies. It's a delicious soup made from vegetables that do not fulfill supermarkets' aesthetic standards to be sold in stores, but are perfect in every other way. And they taste really well. I had a bite earlier. So go and nourish yourself while doing good for the planet, like we've discussed basically all morning, regularly. Price for the soup is 1,200, and musing during lunch is kjörk. Pay them good attention. And also, you can wander around Harpa. There are exhibitions open during the lunch break, but be back at 1 o'clock. See you then.